Chapter 579. Xiaoqing was satisfied with the beating and rubbed her fists. She looked down and saw that the man was huddled in the corner, trembling like a pitiful boy who had been gang-raped. She sneered and said, "I'll teach you a lesson. Next time, when you tease someone, you should look carefully. What kind of temper do you have? Do you have the advantage in numbers? If it were someone with a bad temper, they would have cut off your thing long ago." He didn't dare to talk nonsense anymore. He curled up in the corner, looking as pitiful as he could be. Xiaoqing kicked him twice, but he didn't dare to make a sound. He held it in as tears streamed down his face. Xiaoqing couldn't be bothered to lower herself to his level, so she left with her men. The scene was really like a group of hooligans gang-raping a virgin girl and then leaving her in a mess, crying in the corner. When they returned, old Master Qin was already calling for people to cook. He kept asking Xiaoqing, "What do you like to eat? Is there anything you don't eat?
Don't be shy.
After all, it's your home." Xiaoqing really treated this place as her home. She named 2 dishes and said, "You know my situation. I definitely can't eat much." Old Master Qin's heart ached. He pulled Xiaoqing and said, "I know you two have suffered a lot. In the future, don't be afraid of anything. Even if the sky falls, I'll hold it up. Although I don't have many years left to live, my bones are still strong. Even if the sky falls, I won't break." "What are you talking about? Your body is in good condition. You'll definitely live a long life." Xiaoqing frowned and calculated. If a superpowered person's body was in good condition, their lifespan would definitely be extended. Old Master Qin was now in his 60s. At most, he could be considered middle-aged. She thought of some ways to increase old Master Qin's strength. Of course, she had to side with her own people. Old Master Qin kept pulling Xiaoqing to the sofa to talk. Xiaoqing told old Master Qin about the man she met today. After all, he sounded like he had a good family background. Although she wasn't afraid, it was still troublesome. She should let old Master Qin be mentally prepared. Old Master Qin was so angry that he jumped up and shouted, "Don't stop me. I'm going to break that brat's legs. How dare he tease my daughter?" Moreover, it took several people working together to hold him back. Old Master Qin had a bad temper. Although he was persuaded, he would definitely hold a grudge. In the future, that brat would definitely suffer. Xiaoqing helplessly smiled bitterly, but her heart was very warm. Since she was a child, she had never felt the feeling of her family standing up for her. When she was bullied and got into fights at school, or when she attended parent-teacher conferences, she always hoped that her parents would stand up for her. More than 20 years had passed, and this thought had long faded. She no longer had the persistence and desire of the past, but she had everything. These family members were very precious to her. Xiaoqing lowered her eyes. Now that she had power and influence, no one could hurt her family. At dinner time, Mr. and Mrs. Qin came back. No one knew whether they were satisfied with old Master Qin's decision or not, but at least their attitude towards Xiaoqing was good. Mrs. Qin put food in Xiaoqing's bowl and said, "Eat more." "Xiaoqing, are you going to stay here this time? It's good that you don't have to run around. It's not safe outside. Anyway, it's comfortable to stay at home. After dinner, I'll prepare a room for you." Old Master Qin was very satisfied with Mrs. Qin's reaction. He nodded slightly and said, "Stay here. Don't worry, no one will dare to say anything." Xiaoqing shook her head and said, "My friend built a base in the south. I'm living in that base now. The land there is very spacious, and I built a vegetable farm there. Next, I'm preparing to build a farm, so I can't leave. Our family can't support you and your mother. You're so tired all the time.
Come home. Come home and stay."
Old Master Qin had a fierce face. When he made a loving expression, it was a little stiff, but it was full of sincerity. Xiaoqing shook her head. "Godfather, no one knows what will happen in the future. I have to store some things so that I can rest assured. It's also a retreat route. If you manage it well, you'll have a place to stay in the future." Old Master Qin's heart ached, but he didn't emphasize it. He only said, "When you have time, bring the baby back to see me." Then he began to sigh. "I'm old. It's time for me to retire. I just want to see my grandson more. Okay? Xiaoqing silently put food in old Master Qin's bowl. In the past, she probably built the farm on a whim. Now, she was prepared to manage it well. Even if she didn't think for herself, she had to think for the Qin family. After the apocalypse, what they lacked most was fresh vegetables and fruits. They could never have enough of these things. After going back, she also planned to open a grain farm and fruit farm. Anyway, she had a little brother at home who specialized in this area. It would be a waste if she didn't use him. Tang Tianda, QAQ Father Qin and Xiaoqing didn't have much affection. In fact, he was against this matter. After all, Xiaoqing's identity was too dangerous. If something happened in the future, Xiaoqing would become a reason for others to attack their family. However, when he looked at old Master Qin's white hair, he couldn't say no. He was stubborn and had been in a cold war with Qin Zishi for many years. He really didn't let old Master Qin enjoy the joy of a family reunion. Old Master Qin was already at this age. It wasn't easy for him to find a suitable goddaughter. He really couldn't bear to ruin it. Father Qin was very helpless. After a long while, he thought, as long as old Master Qin was happy, what was there to be afraid of even if something really happened? Their Qin family had never been afraid of anything. While they were enjoying themselves here, chaos broke out outside. It was noisy. Among the messy footsteps, there was a vigorous voice. That old bastard surnamed Qin, you've grown up. You know how to bully my grandson. How can you bully the young so smoothly?
Get out of my way.
If you stop me again, I'll shoot you. The guards couldn't stop them. In the end, a group of people arrived in front of Xiaoqing. The person in the lead looked about the same age as old Master Qin. Behind him, there was another person who looked very familiar to Xiaoqing. Oh, wasn't this the one who made her cry today? She must have called her parents. The old man walked over fiercely. He pointed at old Master Qin and scolded, "Our two families didn't interfere with each other's business. We've been safe and sound for so many years."
Qin, what do you mean by this?
How dare your grandson beat my grandson up like this? How shameless. Chapter 580. Old Master Qin was infuriated. How dare the guilty party complain first? He slammed the table and stood up, not to be outdone. He roared, "If your grandson didn't flirt with my daughter, would my grandson hit your grandson? I'll say it now. I've gone easy on him. If you want me to hit him, I won't be able to break his legs." The old man said sarcastically, "Do you think your daughter is a goddess? Anyone who sees her would want to take liberties with her. You old fart, what kind of daughter can you give birth to?" Old Master Qin's eyes widened. He pulled Xiaoqing over and patted his chest proudly. "My daughter is prettier than a goddess. That grandson of yours is really a grandson." The old man wanted to mock old Master Qin, but when he saw Xiaoqing, he was stunned. When old Master Qin saw this, he couldn't help but laugh. "I already said that my daughter is prettier than Tianxian. Are you stunned? Let me tell you, this enmity is set. You came at the right time today. I was just about to find your grandson to settle the score, and you brought your grandson to my door. You saved me the trouble. Today, both of you don't have to leave. Let's settle the score properly." As he spoke, he felt that something was wrong. 2 drops of turbid tears fell from the corners of the old man's eyes. He and the old man had fought for most of their lives. Even when the old man's sons died on the battlefield one after another, he had never seen the old man cry. But now he was crying. His tears flowed down uncontrollably. His fingers trembled as he reached out, wanting to touch Xiaoqing's face. Xiaoqing subconsciously took a step back. She was alert. Only then did the old man wake up. Then, he looked at Xiaoqing with a disappointed and kind gaze. "Little girl, I'm sorry. Did I scare you?" Xiaoqing shook her head. She felt that this old man was very strange. It was better to stay away from him. The old man seemed to have forgotten that he was here to denounce Xiaoqing. He kept looking at Xiaoqing with a very special gaze. Then he praised, "Old Qin, how much virtue did you accumulate in your previous life to give birth to such a beautiful daughter? I did it. Old Master Qin snorted. Even if she's not my biological daughter, she still follows me. She wasn't his biological daughter. After tricking him into telling him what he wanted to know, the old man narrowed his eyes and asked like an old fox, "Then where did you pick up such a good daughter?" "I also want to pick one up." "Daughter, what's your name? How old are you this year? When is your birthday?" Before he could finish, old Master Qin shielded Xiaoqing warily and said, "Even if he's an old cow eating young grass, he still needs some face. You old thing, move your eyes away. Don't even think about my daughter." The old man's face darkened. Just as he was about to defend himself, he heard old Master Qin say, "Your grandson teased my daughter. Grandpa, do you want to try?" "Your whole family is shameless." Only then did the old man remember what he was here for. He immediately brought his grandson over. The young man walked over obediently. "Grandpa, do you believe me or him?" Then, the old man picked him up and gave him a beating. The belt and the boot were all used. The young man was beaten until he cried out in pain. It was obvious that the old man was really ruthless. He didn't intend to show any mercy at all. As he beat him, he muttered, "You've grown up and dare to tease anyone. How did you raise such a grandson?" "Oh, Grandpa, don't hit my face. And don't hit my butt. Oh my God, I don't dare. I really don't dare." The young man cried out, but he was tightly held and couldn't run away. He pulled a long face and tears came out. Wasn't this called the evils brought on by oneself the hardest to bear? Chapter 581. In fact, he really didn't think of telling his parents at that time. After all, although he was immoral, he wasn't that bad. However, as soon as he got home, he met his grandfather. At that time, he was in a mess and looked very pitiful. In the end, his grandfather caught him. The old man asked him what happened. He didn't dare to say that he was beaten for flirting with a good woman, so he stammered and put the blame on Qin Zishi. Who would have thought that his grandfather would come directly, and he would be beaten up again? How pitiful! After beating his grandson and expressing the excitement in his heart, the old man asked the question again. Xiaoqing said calmly, "I'm from S City. I'm 27 years old this year. I don't have parents. I was picked up from the garbage bin by an old lady who was picking up scraps. So, I don't know my birthday, and I've never celebrated it." For a person who had a hard time even living, birthdays were really dispensable. She would only celebrate Mulin's birthday once a year. She would treat it as celebrating her own birthday as well. The old man held back his tears and said, "Child, now I suspect that you're my child, because you look exactly like my wife, except for your eyes. And your eyes are like mine." "You're joking." Xiaoqing smiled and said softly, "Today was really a farce. I don't want to pursue what happened before. That's it. Godfather, I'm going to rest." Old Master Qin glared at the old man who was about to snatch his daughter and snorted. "You said she's yours, so she's yours? You want to snatch something good when you see it, even my daughter. Don't even think about it." The old man looked at Xiaoqing helplessly. In fact, he couldn't be sure, but Xiaoqing was too similar to his wife, and she was an orphan. He couldn't help but think of his lost daughter. His wife had given birth to 6 children for him, 5 boys and 1 girl. 4 of them had died in the war. One of them was the father of the young man beside him, and the last one, who was also the youngest girl, had been lost. His wife cried day and night because of this. She fell ill and passed away just like that. Before she left, she even held his hand and told him that no matter what, he had to find his daughter. The old man couldn't help but recall the first time he held his daughter. Her soft and small body was very delicate. He didn't dare to use any strength. His body was frozen in that position, afraid that he would accidentally hurt the delicate baby in his arms. His hands, which had held guns all his life, could not hold a small baby. His hands, which could be very steady when killing people, were trembling as if he had Parkinson's disease. He was so happy that he wanted to tell the whole world that he had a daughter. At that time, he even discussed with his wife what name they wanted their daughter to be named. He flipped through the dictionary and listed all the beautiful words, wisdom, beauty, softness, and immortality. His wife had said that she didn't want her daughter to be too intelligent because wisdom was bound to hurt. She didn't want her daughter to be too beautiful because beautiful women would have short lives. She didn't want her daughter to be too gentle because with their tolerance, it was fine as long as his daughter was happy. In the end, they named their daughter Tianxiao, and her nickname was Pingvin. They hoped that their daughter would be happy every day, that her smile would never disappear from the corners of her mouth, and that she would be safe and happy for the rest of her life. But he didn't expect that it wasn't Ping but Ping. Ping as in duckweed. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, he wouldn't give up. When the old man left, he bent his back, which had never collapsed in his entire life, like the most ordinary old man. He bent his back, looking as though he had aged many years. Slowly, he left the Qin family. When he left, Xiaoqing was actually standing by the window on the second floor, watching silently until the grandfather and granddaughter left the Qin family. Yan Qiue walked over and whispered, "Do you believe it?" Xiaoqing didn't say anything. After a while, she muttered, "The wind is blowing. It's a little cold." She had yearned for her family, but that was 20 years ago. She was leaning against the window, staring at a cream cake while drooling silently. A little girl in a flowery dress was sitting in the shop, eating pudding, and then innocently asking her mother, "Is she a beggar?" Back then, she would fantasize that her mother would come looking for her, holding her in her arms with heartache, and calling her name. But later, day after day passed. In order to survive, she was covered in cuts and bruises. Bit by bit, she saw this world full of evil clearly. She no longer had such beautiful fantasies. More than 20 years later, she had already lost what she should have lost and possessed what she should have. But someone stood up and said that she could very well be her child. At this moment, Xiaoqing's heart didn't fluctuate much. She just leaned against the window, wearing Yan Qiue's clothes and quietly reminiscing about the past. Mulin stood to the side, feeling very conflicted.
She didn't know how to persuade Xiaoqing.
She didn't have much expectations for this late kinship, but she didn't know what Xiaoqing was thinking. After a long time, Xiaoqing asked her, "Do you still remember when we were adopted?" "Yes." Mulin covered her mouth, holding back the urge to cry. Xiaoqing had been very beautiful since she was young. Even though long-term malnutrition made her look a little thin and weak, she was still the most beautiful among the group of children. Many people tried to adopt Xiaoqing. Every time, Xiaoqing would insist, "Can I take Mulin with me?"
Mulin was the same.
The two of them were like two little hedgehogs, spreading their hard thorns to the world and leaving their soft abdomens to each other. Mulin had actually been adopted once because the aunt told her that if she followed her, there would be a lot of delicious food. She didn't want Xiaoqing to be beaten black and blue just to steal some food. She didn't want Xiaoqing to drool over those snacks. She followed the aunt because she wanted to get a lot of food. That way, the two of them wouldn't have to worry about winter anymore. When Xiaoqing sent her off, her gaze was very gentle. She whispered, "Ah Qing, wait for me to bring back delicious food." Xiaoqing smiled and didn't say anything. She knew that Mulin would go to another city, which was very far away. About 2 weeks later, Mulin came back. She was dirty and looked very disheveled. She stood at the entrance of the orphanage and was scolded for a long time by the aunt of the orphanage because she sneaked back. But Mulin was very happy. She held a bunch of candies and said to Xiaoqing, "I won't leave alone. Look, I brought you something." At that time, Xiaoqing thought that Mulin didn't rely on her. They relied on each other. Chapter 582. The relationship between Mulin and Xiaoqing was probably no longer as simple friends, best friends, or sisters. It could not be described with words. They were closer than family. Moreover, Xiaoqing now had old Master Qin and the rest. As family, she no longer needed any other relatives. So what if those people had the same blood as her flowing in their bodies? In the past 20 years, when she needed family the most, Mulin was the only one by her side. Only now did they appear and tell her that they were her family. There was no need for that at all. The Tan family had a big business. If they really wanted to find her, how could they not find her? Xiao Qing curled her lips somewhat mockingly. Then, she led her friends back to her room to rest. Mu Lin bit the corner of her lips and said, "If it's true." Xiao Qing decisively cut her off and said, "Let's not talk about this, okay? I'm so sleepy. I want to sleep." Mu Lin shut her mouth and looked at her worriedly. She knew Xiao Qing's character very well. Even if she rejected her, she would feel upset and upset for a long time. As they walked upstairs, Mu Lin finally couldn't hold it in. "Didn't you say that your biggest wish was to see your mother? Now that you have the chance, why don't you fight for it?" She said softly, "I know you probably have resentment in your heart. If I were you, I would have done the same. But no matter what, he's still your family. Don't you want to know the so-called truth?" Xiao Qing didn't say anything, but she felt a little bitter. Since she had already chosen to abandon him back then, why did she have to put on such a farce today? "Go back to sleep." Xiao Qing didn't say anything else and just returned to her room. The next day, she woke up very early. However, someone had already come to look for her. This person was none other than the old man from the Tan family. He was a little nervous and looked around anxiously until he saw Xiao Qing. He relaxed a little and then said softly, "Did I disturb your rest?" After a night of thinking, Xiao Qing was much calmer when she faced the old man again. She faintly said, "No. May I ask what is the matter? If not, I'll take my leave." The old man said with some difficulty, "I found a strand of hair that belonged to you on Xiao-er's body. Then I did a test. You are my daughter." Xiao-er was the man who had been beaten up by Xiao Qing. Probably when she was beating him up, her hair fell on his body. That long hair did not belong to him at first glance. "If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Xiao Qing was very calm. She had already guessed it. Even the old man could recognize her by her appearance, so he would not be mistaken. The old man's face was a little embarrassed, but he still asked, "Why did you go out? Do you need my help?" Xiao Qing had accumulated a lot of negative emotions in her heart. As long as she looked at the old man and heard him speak, she would be reminded of a long time ago. She was picked up from the trash can and sent to the orphanage. How could they not find her? As long as they had the heart, with the Tan family's power, how could they not find her? She didn't want to question them, but she also didn't want to face this problem. She had family and didn't need other family members. Probably because her attitude was too cold, the fat old man felt her rejection. He could only smile bitterly and then said, "You hate us in your heart, right?" He could imagine that a child who grew up in an orphanage would have a hard life. It was normal for her to hate them. Chapter 583. He wasn't discouraged because of this. He only said slowly, "Are you willing to listen to me tell you a story?" Xiao Qing's foot, which had already stepped out, instantly froze. Although he said that he didn't care, he still cared. When she was young, she had also questioned why she was abandoned in her dreams. There were many abandoned children in the orphanage. They were all physically or mentally challenged. There were also some who were born with diseases, so they were abandoned by their families. What about her? Whether it was her body or her IQ, she didn't seem to be sick. Then why was she abandoned? Why did someone only find her after so many years? And it was because of an accident. She once really wanted to know. Now, although she said that she didn't care about it, she still cared. She stopped in her tracks. The old man sighed and said, "You were secretly taken away by someone. The person who took you away was the original nanny. Back then, because of some problems, the nanny hated the Tan family very much, so she secretly took you away. We have searched many places, but we couldn't find you." The old man said helplessly, "I wanted to see you more than anyone else. I know that you might not be able to accept it immediately. I'm not in a hurry. Take your time to think about it." The old man knew very well that there wouldn't be a good outcome if he pushed too hard. Xiao Qing believed most of it, but not all of it. She was very calm, but her fingertips were trembling slightly. She finally knew why she was abandoned. No one had abandoned her. Everything was just a conspiracy. She just happened to be the victim. She didn't want to pursue the details because everything was in the past. She was living very well now. No matter what happened back then, no matter what the reason was, you didn't find me because this only means that we weren't fated to be father and daughter. It's all in the past.
Let it be.
I'm now Xiaoqing, the daughter of the Qin family. Xiaoqing clenched her fists and said calmly and politely. It would be a lie to say that she didn't have any resentment in her heart. She wasn't a saint, but after knowing everything, the so-called resentment had long disappeared. What followed was tiredness. The old man was very vague, hiding many details. She did not want to pursue those details, but she did not want to return to this home. Even if this family was very powerful and wealthy, it was not her family. Her home was in Jiang City. Now, there was another Qin family. However, there was one place that had nothing to do with her, and that was the Tan family. I know it's too late to say anything now. Child, I won't force you to do anything. I just beg you, can you go back and look at your mother's memorial tablet and tell her? After all, when she passed away, her eyes were wide open, looking into the distance. Tell me, old man, you have to find your daughter. She's still so young. She must have suffered a lot outside. When she breathed her last, her eyes were still wide open, looking into the distance with tears in the corners of her eyes. Go back and take a look, and let your mother rest in peace. Xiaoqing answered with difficulty. Okay. When she was young, she had imagined countless times what her mother would be like. She would be gentle, smile at her, and tell her stories when she was sleeping. With her limited imagination, she couldn't think of anything else. She could only imagine that her mother would be warm. She could hate anyone, but she could not hate her mother. Okay. The old man said a few words. Then, he asked carefully, how about we go over now? Xiaoqing nodded. Then, she brought Dai, Yan Qiwa, and Mu Lin with her. It was obvious that the old man was very happy. He talked along the way, talking about Xiaoqing's mother when she was young. The Tan family was not far from the Qin family. When the old man brought them back, the man was already waiting at the door. It was Tan Xiao. From his name, it could be seen that the entire Tan family had not forgotten Xiaoqing, Tan Xiao, and Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao's expression was very complicated. He would never have thought that after he flirted with a girl, that girl would become his aunt the next day. Biological. His dog eyes must have been blind. It was still very early, and there were very few people at home. The old man brought Xiaoqing all the way to the place where his ex-wife's memorial tablet was placed. The room was empty, but it could be seen that it was often cleaned. The memorial tablet was placed in the middle of the room. In front of it were some simple offerings. There was not even a black and white photo. Xiaoqing had no way of knowing if she really looked like her mother. She only stood in front of the memorial tablet and stared at the row of words, Tan Zheng's wife, Madame Zheng. This was her mother's memorial tablet, the woman who gave birth to her. Xiaoqing felt her eyes sting for some reason, but she could not cry because she did not have tears. She only looked at it quietly. After a long time, she asked the old man, "Do they really look alike?" The old man said firmly, "Yes, very alike. They are exactly the same." She knelt down and lit a stick of incense. The two men, including Mu Lin, also kowtowed a few times. Xiaoqing did not say anything. She knelt for a long time. When she finally stood up, she was fine. However, Yan Qiwa's legs were a little weak. The old man stood behind and watched her back. His eyes were filled with tears. He had not cried many times in his life. The last time he cried was for his wife. "Alan, did you see? Our daughter is back. She is as beautiful as you. She came back to see you." The old man kept nagging. The tears in his eyes did not stop. It did not matter that his daughter did not want to admit it. At least she was back. At least he knew that his daughter was safe and sound. "Old woman, you should be able to rest in peace in the underworld." The old man laughed. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and made up his mind. He owed Xiaoqing more than 20 years. Now that he had found Xiaoqing, he would not let anyone have the chance to hurt Xiaoqing, not even the Heavenly King. He only hoped that before he died, Xiaoqing would acknowledge him. Then, even if he died, he would be able to rest in peace. When he was in the underworld, he could look for his wife and tell her that his daughter was calling for him. After slowly calming down, the old man realized that something was wrong. For example, the two men beside Xiaoqing. His expression changed. He could not help but feel wronged. Could it be that his daughter had been kidnapped? Chapter 584. After kowtowing and offering incense, Xiaoqing prepared to leave. She felt much more relaxed now that her only obsession in her life had been resolved. Old Master Tan was left behind as he watched Xiaoqing leave with her people with a dumbfounded expression. His mind was filled with the thought, "Oh fuck, my daughter has been kidnapped." After Xiaoqing left, he called Tan Xiao over. That afternoon, when Xiaoqing was eating, Tan Xiao leaned against the door frame of the Qin family's house and shouted shamelessly, "I'm here to look for my aunt. My biological aunt. Don't stop me. Aunt, your nephew is about to be torn apart by 5 horses." Xiaoqing calmly picked up food for her 3 children and let him shout as loud as he wanted. Old Master Qin snorted coldly at the side. This little brat from the Tan family doesn't have much ability, but he's thick-skinned. Even if you don't want to care about him, he can still shamelessly cling to the door until nighttime.
Don't care about him.
Qin Zishi couldn't help but roll her eyes. This brat was going all out and shameless. They continued eating and didn't want to care about Tan Xiao anymore. Tan Xiao fully demonstrated how shameless he was. Xiaoqing and the rest heard that there was no sound outside and thought that this brat had finally stopped. Unexpectedly, after 2 minutes, Tan Zhao's voice suddenly came from outside. It was like a ghost wailing and wolves howling. His voice was especially loud. Those who didn't know would think that someone was doing something to him. Xiaoqing couldn't eat anymore. She bit her chopsticks and had a headache. They had no choice but to go out and see what was going on. When they went out to take a look, Tan Xiao was sitting on the ground and rolling around. He didn't look like a playboy at all. Instead, he looked like a scoundrel. Tan Xiao sat on the ground and rolled around while crying, "Aunt, you can't abandon me.
I'll die.
Aunt, pity me. Aunt, my biological aunt." Xiaoqing was speechless. As soon as Tan Xiao saw Xiaoqing come out, she quickly rushed over and hugged Xiaoqing's thigh. Then she continued to cry, "Auntie, Auntie, I know you're not willing to give me up. You're a good person." The passers-by who were watching the show could not help but cast their gazes over. Xiaoqing covered her forehead with a helpless expression. Then, she mercilessly stretched out her leg and kicked Tan Xiao out. "Scram. Stay away from me. Don't make me repeat myself." Feeling wronged, Tan Xiao hugged himself into a ball and rolled himself to the corner. He looked at Xiaoqing helplessly. He looked so pitiful that the people around were talking about it. Xiaoqing closed the door with a bang. Before the door was closed, Tan Xiao rushed over and stood in the gap of the door fearlessly. As long as he pinched, he could break Xiaoqing's neck. Xiaoqing was expressionless. "What do you want?" "Grandpa asked me to follow you." Speaking of which, Tan Xiao felt even more wronged. His grandpa was so fierce that he shouted that he would break his legs if he could not complete the task. He also said that no matter what, he should stay by Xiaoqing's side and find a way to arouse Xiaoqing's desire for family affection. But in the current situation, it seemed that he could only arouse Xiaoqing's desire to break his legs. "No, you can go." Xiaoqing stretched out her leg to push Tan Zhao's forehead and pushed him out. Tan Xiao tried to hold on to the door and refused to retreat.
"No, Auntie.
If I go back like this, Grandpa will definitely break my legs." "What does that have to do with me?" Xiaoqing was expressionless and continued to kick him out. After the molestation incident, if it were not because she did not want to cause trouble for the Qin family, she would have broken Tan Zhao's legs. He even pretended to be pitiful in front of her. He deserved to have his legs broken. Tan Xiao put himself in the gap of the door with difficulty. No matter how Xiaoqing kicked and pushed him, He did not move. He even negotiated with Xiaoqing. Auntie, let me stay. I can do laundry and mop the floor. If you ask me to go east, I will not go west. If you ask me to beat a dog, I will not beat a chicken. Chapter 585. I'm telling you to get out of my sight. Xiaoqing gestured for her friends to help, so a few of them rushed forward and dragged Tan Xiao out. Tan Xiao was still being dragged on the ground. He was especially unwilling. Auntie, I know I'm wrong. Seeing that I'm so handsome, please save me this time. Then the door was closed. Tan Xiao, who was lying on the ground, was speechless. Xiaoqing really didn't want to talk to him. She thought that Tan Xiao would behave himself after being humiliated, but to her surprise, Tan Xiao didn't leave her house after that day. He sat at the door. Whenever someone opened the door, he would find a way to get in. When no one opened the door, he would sit at the door and knock from time to time. He made himself look very pitiful. The guards who had gone out to investigate had all returned. They brought back a lot of news, but none of it was good news. The same thing happened in many bases. The difference was that most of the bases mainly drank the water made by superpowered people. Only a few of them drank purified water. Only those bases that didn't have many water superpowered people would drink purified water. Therefore, in most of the bases there were only a few ordinary people who turned into zombies, so people didn't raise their vigilance. There were only a few bases that were almost wiped out because of drinking purified water. However, it fully proved that Xiaoqing's guess was right. The problem did appear in the water source, and it wasn't as simple as a base. Could it be that the entire environment had been completely polluted? If that was the case, it would be the end of human beings. There had been cases in the capital, but the number was small, so it didn't attract much attention. After Xiaoqing's guess was confirmed, Master Qin had a headache. He hurriedly contacted all the higher-ups in the capital and went to a meeting. Master Qin was going to take Xiaoqing with him, but Xiaoqing refused. Her identity was too sensitive. If she really attended the meeting, it wouldn't be a good thing. Master Qin knew that Xiaoqing was worried, so he didn't say much and went to the meeting. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Tan Xiao squatting at the door. Tan Xiao had been squatting there for a long time. When he saw someone open the door, he wanted to hug his thigh, but when he found that it was Master Qin, he hurriedly turned around and fell on his face. Old Master Qin snorted coldly, stepped on his palm, and walked over. Tan Xiao, who was in so much pain that tears came out of his eyes. The meeting was about to begin, and Xiaoqing was also preparing to leave. She had already done her best by informing the capital city. She actually wanted to participate in the upcoming meeting, but considering the views of some people, she might as well walk around and find a boyfriend for her Mulin, or find herself a mutated plant to fill in the last vacancy. She was at level 7 and she could subdue another plant. For Xiaoqing, what she needed now was probably a support-type plant, preferably a healing-type plant. She didn't need it herself, but her friends did. She already had enough plants for attacking and so on. Now, she only lacked a healing plant for her little friends to use. Hence, she wasn't in a hurry. She could take her friends and walk around while looking for one. Whether she could find it or not depended on fate. This wasn't something that could be forced. She was going to talk to old Master Qin about leaving after the meeting. Chapter 586. When Xiaoqing left with her friends, old Master Qin sent them all the way out of the city, looking at her back. Xiaoqing was a little embarrassed to leave. She had never been cared about so much, except for the few in her family. She couldn't help but feel warm. When they left, it was close to noon, so they didn't walk far before they stopped to prepare lunch. In order to show that he was useful, Tan Xiao first went to pick up some firewood, then came back to clean the ingredients and help with the fire. After lunch, he even washed the dishes. Xiaoqing suddenly felt that it was okay to take him with them. At least, they could save the money of hiring a nanny. He didn't eat much, but he did a lot of work. He was like an all-around nanny. When she was in a bad mood, she could use him as a punching bag. They walked leisurely, neither slow nor fast. Soon, they entered the southern area. After Doomsday, the temperature changed a lot. Originally, the southern area was a little bit humid, but the climate was good. However, after Doomsday, the southern area became hot. It was almost as hot as Africa. Many of the mutated animals and plants that could walk had moved to the north to live. There were fewer survivor bases in the southern area than in the northern area. Let's rest here today, okay? If we go any further, we might reach a place with more zombies. Xiaoqing looked into the distance and found that there should be a town in front of them. The town was quite prosperous before Doomsday because it happened to be close to a cement road, so the traffic was relatively smooth. So, the number of zombies in the town should be quite high. Although Xiaoqing and the others were not afraid of zombies, they were afraid of trouble. If they could, it would be better to go around. They were now in the small forest next to the cement road. This time, Xiaoqing made boiled fish and braised pork. The others were sitting aside and drooling. Although Tan Xiao had not been with her for long, he had seen her cooking skills. Now, he was completely kneeling under Xiaoqing's apron. Just as the meal was ready, before they started eating, they heard a burst of noisy footsteps. A group of people was running towards them, followed by a lot of zombies. Xiaoqing had just scooped up the soup, and before she could decide whether to do anything, the young man at the front shouted, "Run! There are zombies behind us!" He actually didn't think of using them to block the zombies. He was a pretty good person. Xiaoqing reluctantly put down her chopsticks and then released her little vine. Among the group of zombies, only one was at level 5. The rest were at level 3 or 4. They were easy to deal with. Xiaoqing cleaned them up in less than a minute. Those who were being chased were still in a daze. They had risked their lives to escape and had even lost a few of their companions. In the end, Xiaoqing had waved her hand and solved their problems. This was the real gap between them. Xiaoqing actually had 3 reasons for saving people. First, she had already seen them, and it was easy for her to do so. If she did not save them, it would be too much. Second, this young man was willing to speak out and remind her. He seemed to be a good person. If it were someone else, they might have used them to block the zombies. The most important point was that the young man at the front was very good-looking. Xiaoqing was currently looking for a boyfriend for Mulin, but she still did not want to let go of any good-looking guy. This was a world that really depended on looks. The young man was the first to come over, and then he thanked them. "Thank you so much. If it weren't for you, I don't know how many of us would have survived." Chapter 587. Xiaoqing was very easygoing. "You're welcome. What's your name?
How old are you?
Do you have a girlfriend?" As soon as Mulin heard this, he knew that Xiaoqing was asking on his behalf, because it was absolutely impossible for Xiaoqing to hit on a stranger in front of the 2 men in her family. Mulin couldn't help but take another look at the young man. The young man seemed to be in his early 20s. He was very young and handsome. Most importantly, he had a gentle temperament. Thank you very much. If it weren't for you, we would have become zombies' lunch." The young man whispered, "My name is Mu Lianchuan. I'm 21 years old. I don't have a girlfriend." When he talked about girlfriends, he couldn't help but blush. Then he whispered, "I'm just an ordinary person. I don't have any superpowers. No girl likes me." He looked so pitiful that even Xiaoqing couldn't help but reach out and touch his head. He was a very cute boy. Xiaoqing looked at Mulin, indicating that she should chat with him if she was interested. It was quite difficult to meet someone she liked these days. Xiaoqing hoped that Mulin could find a partner to accompany her in the future. Although Mulin wasn't interested, he couldn't help but comfort him when he saw the young man's pitiful appearance. "You're good-looking. There will always be girls who like you." Was that really comforting? Xiaoqing couldn't help but rub her head. Then she deliberately said, "It's fate that we met. Do you want to stay for a meal?" The others were tired after running for a long time. When they heard that there was food, they immediately gathered around and looked at Xiaoqing eagerly. Xiaoqing pointed to the front calmly and said, "There's a town in front. There must be something to eat. You can find it yourselves." Then she turned her head and pulled Mu Lianchuan. The difference in treatment was too obvious. The others didn't have a good relationship with Mu Lianchuan. Their faces turned ugly when they heard this, but they didn't say anything. After all, they had seen Xiao Qing's strength. They didn't dare to cause trouble, so they left Mu Lianchuan and left together. Mu Lianchuan was very embarrassed, and then he said, I should also go. You saved me, so I should repay you. How can I have the nerve to eat your food? As he spoke, he blushed a little. I can't repay you for saving my life now. If there's a chance, I will repay you. Xiao Qing intended for him to spend more time with Mu Lin, so naturally, she wouldn't let him leave just like that. Xiao Qing hurriedly pulled him back and said, It's just a meal. It's not worth much, so why refuse? Since it's fate that brought us together, let's sit down and have a meal together. I still have some things to ask you, unless you're afraid that we'll ask you to repay our kindness and are in a hurry to leave. Xiao Qing was moving him with emotion and reasoning. She even used the legendary goading method. Mu Lianchuan's face was red all the time. He hurriedly said, I'm really not in a hurry to leave. Then sit down and have a meal together. Xiao Qing said lightly. When Mu Lianchuan heard this, he said helplessly, All right then, I'm sorry to trouble you. During the meal, Mu Lin's seat was arranged by Xiao Qing to be next to Mu Lianchuan. Mu Lin whispered to Xiao Qing, I really don't mean that, and I don't want to find a boyfriend. I'm not forcing you to get married. I'm just letting you interact with him. If you don't like him, then forget it. Why do you have to look like a white-haired girl? Xiao Qing rubbed her head and said, It's just a meal together. Not letting you sleep. Have a good chat. If you don't like him, then part on good terms. What's the big deal? Only then did Mu Lin go back and sit down obediently. The reason why she was against dating was because of her dead boyfriend. However, people should look forward and not stay in the shadows of the past. In the past, Mu Lin kept a gigolo to relieve her boredom because she was lonely. Now that she had found Xiao Qing, she would not be lonely anymore. Naturally, she did not want to have a boyfriend anymore. However, Xiao Qing hoped that she could find someone she loved. They were relatives and good sisters, but she could not replace her lover's identity. Therefore, Xiao Qing wanted to untie Mu Lin's knot in her heart and find her a good man. If she liked someone, it did not matter if there were a few more. Again, it was not like she could not afford to raise them. With the current financial and material resources of Jiang City, she could raise a few men. Even a company or a regiment of men could be raised. She was not afraid of Mu Lin's love, but she was afraid that she was not willing to find one. During the meal, Mu Lianchuan was a little reserved. He only touched the dish in front of him. Xiao Qing did not care and kept observing him secretly. Mu Lin was a soft-hearted person, at least compared to her. Seeing the young man like this, she could not help but pick up some food for him. Don't be too restrained. Eat whatever you want. Those who don't know will think that you only like to eat plain rice. Mu Lianchuan bit his lower lip and said thank you softly. Mu Lin liked this kind of boy the most. Probably because of her early experience, she was especially competitive in this aspect. She liked boys who were passive, but not cowardly. She could pamper them. It was okay for her to raise them. It was even good for her to raise them. This way, she would feel very safe. Seeing Mu Lianchuan's cute appearance, Mu Lin was actually a little moved. It would be good if she could find a boyfriend like Mu Lianchuan. When she was free, she would tease him. When she was busy, he would definitely help her silently. He would be shy and blush. They could kiss each other during the day and have sex at night. How good was that? However, Mu Lin liked it when both parties were willing. If Mu Lianchuan was not interested in her, she would definitely not force him to go back. A forcibly picked melon would not be sweet. With chopsticks in her mouth, Mu Lin looked at Mu Lianchuan. Perhaps she could try it out and see what he was interested in. If he was not interested in this aspect, it was okay. She could just change to another one. Thinking about it, she was really envious of Xiao Qing's interactions with her men. There were men who pampered Xiao Qing, and were also pampered by Xiao Qing. It was enviable. Mu Lin was not prepared to express her thoughts directly. It would be okay if Mu Lianchuan agreed. What if he did not? Xiao Qing would definitely snatch him away. Mu Lin, who had made up her mind, picked up some food for Mu Lianchuan and said, "Eat more. I see that you are so thin. You look like you will be blown away by the wind."
How can you be so thin?
Mu Lianchuan smiled shyly. Then, he picked up some food with his chopsticks and put it in Mu Lin's bowl. He whispered, "I can't get fat no matter how much I eat. Especially after the apocalypse, I have been running around. So, I lost some weight, but I have muscles." He even showed off his pitiful muscles. Mu Lin could not help but laugh. Xiao Qing looked at this happy scene and suddenly felt a little out of place. Chapter 588. That strange feeling came out of nowhere, but it made Xiao Qing feel uneasy. The key point was that she didn't know where this feeling came from. Xiao Qing looked at Mu Lianchuan carefully and felt that her uneasiness was too strange. Mu Lianchuan was very normal. He was just an ordinary person. Except for his handsome face, there was nothing special about him. Thinking of this, she suddenly had an inspiration. She looked at Mu Lianchuan carefully from bottom to top. Xiao Qing had always believed in her premonitions. Her sixth sense was very accurate. It had saved her many times and had never made a mistake. Therefore, Xiao Qing felt that there must be something wrong with Mu Lianchuan. Just when Mu Lin was considering whether to have a deeper conversation with Mu Lianchuan to understand him better, Xiao Qing suddenly touched Mu Lianchuan's cheek with her fingertips. Mu Lin was stunned for a moment, then calmly crossed Mu Lianchuan off the list of people to understand him better. Men were like clothes, and Xiao Qing was like a brother. She wouldn't quarrel with a brother over a piece of clothing. Then, things developed beyond her imagination. After Xiao Qing touched Mu Lianchuan's face, she suddenly pulled out a military knife and stabbed it into Mu Lianchuan's chest. Mu Lianchuan also jumped back quickly. He reacted quickly and jumped out of Xiao Qing's attack range. He didn't look like an ordinary person at all. Tan Xiao was stunned and murmured, "A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the sea." There was still a military knife in Mu Lianchuan's chest, but there wasn't a trace of blood. He was still very calm. "How did you find out?" Xiao Qing said coldly, "Your disguise is too good. I didn't find anything wrong at first, but no matter how good your disguise is, it can't change the fact that you're not a living person. The difference between the skin of a living person and that of a zombie is huge. Color, temperature, flexibility, and other aspects. I've seen too many zombies, so I naturally found something wrong. Then I tested it. Sure enough, your skin is cold and stiff. You don't look like a living person at all. I can't help but admire your observation skills." Mu Lianchuan sighed, gave her a thumbs up, and said, "You're the woman with the sharpest senses I've ever seen. Thank you for the compliment." Xiao Qing pulled out another spare military knife and prepared for battle. Then she said, "Who sent you? What's your purpose?"
Tell me.
Mu Lianchuan smiled. His whole body suddenly flew towards Xiao Qing like an arrow piercing through the air. The surface of his body was covered with a layer of green mist. This green mist was a type of deadly poison, and also one of his trump cards. He didn't dare to say that he was always successful, but at the very least, the number of people who weren't afraid of his poison could be counted on one hand. Mu Lianchuan smiled coldly. Just as he was about to pounce on Xiao Qing, he was entangled by a bunch of vines. He was not afraid because all the vines would be melted by his venom. He was full of confidence, but the next second, he was stunned. All the vines ignored his poisonous mist and tightly trapped him in the middle. Some of the vines even used his poison as nourishment and absorbed part of the poison. What a joke. Xiao Qing had fed her vines with poison. It could be said that her vines were a type of deadly poison. How could something with deadly poison be poisoned? Wasn't this a joke? So Mu Lianchuan was dumbfounded. Originally, he could have escaped, but because he was too confident, he was tightly bound by the vines and hung in the air. Xiao Qing lazily stretched out her hand and touched his cold cheek. Then she said, "This is the feeling." Chapter 589. Mu Lin also went up to touch it. It was cold, but not too stiff. It was like a snake's skin, which made one's hair stand on end. She exclaimed, "Ah, Qing, you're really amazing. How could you tell?" She thought that Mu Lianchuan was really a normal man from the outside. If she didn't try, she wouldn't find out that he was abnormal. Xiao Qing said, "Look at your skin, and then look at his skin. You'll find the difference." She was like this, so it was natural for her to find out that there was something wrong with Mu Lianchuan. Mu Lianchuan struggled for a while, and the thorns on the vines pierced deeper. Xiao Qing smiled and said, "Don't try to struggle. You can't escape." Mu Lianchuan was hung in the air. He sighed helplessly and said, "This time I've lost. I'm convinced. You're even more powerful than the rumors say." "Thank you for the compliment." Xiao Qing was expressionless. She pinched his chin and said, "This time, can you tell me who sent you?" Mu Lianchuan blinked and said, "I wanted to come here. Would you believe me?" Xiao Qing didn't say anything, but the distrust in her eyes was obvious. Mu Lianchuan said helplessly, "In this day and age, the truth is the hardest to believe. No one really sent me here. I only heard some stories about you, so I specially came to take a look. Put me down. We are the same kind, so let's not kill each other." "Who's the same kind as you?"
Bah.
Mulin spat and said without caring about his image, "Don't try to claim connections." Xiao Qing comforted Mulin, then added more vines and tied Mu Lianchuan up tightly. "Okay, I'll believe you this time. Now, you can tell me where you came from." Mu Lianchuan was hung there like a salted fish. He said honestly, "I really can't tell you this. Otherwise, you won't be able to see me again." He changed a shy image and said shamelessly, "Since we're the same kind, please let me go this time. At most, I'll let you sleep with me in any position." Yan Qiue was furious.
Bah.
"In your dreams." Because of his dishonesty, Xiao Qing tightened her vines. She didn't expect him to spit it all out. The food he ate couldn't be digested at all. Because he wasn't human, he didn't have the ability to digest food. So when he was stimulated, he spat it all out. Fortunately, Yan Qiue reacted quickly and jumped away. Otherwise, she would definitely vomit all over him. Mu Lianchuan coughed and cleared his throat before he said, "I'm not joking. I'm serious. I'll sleep with you for a while. Let me go. You can choose any position you like. Man on top and woman on bottom. Woman on top and man on bottom." Xiao Qing decisively stuffed his mouth with a vine. In order to prevent him from biting off the vine, Xiao Qing let the vine entangle his tongue. The sharp thorns instantly penetrated the skin with a kind of anesthetic poison. This time, Mu Lianchuan was really speechless. He looked at Xiao Qing with a resentful face. His eyes were full of complaints, and it was as if he was saying, "You really don't know how to be romantic." Then, a vine pulled open his clothes and exposed his flat and pale chest. When they saw his face, they didn't feel anything strange. However, when his chest was exposed, they also noticed it. Mu Lianchuan's chest was especially white. It was the kind of paleness that looked like it had been soaked in formalin. At first glance, people would think that he was too white. But when they looked closely, they would realize that he was so white that he didn't look like a living person. His tongue was locked, but he still didn't behave. A sickly red color appeared on his cheeks as he said vaguely, "If you want to see my chest, just say it." "You're so beautiful. I'll definitely take it off myself." Xiao Qing ignored him. The vine had already touched his chest. Below his chest, where his heart was, it was calm. There was no beating at all. After confirming his identity, Xiao Qing tied him up into a ball. Then, several people took turns to look at him. Although Tan Xiao was a little stupid, he wasn't stupid. He had just heard too much, and now his brain was a little blank. He seemed to know something that he shouldn't know. Would he be killed?
He was honest.
He lowered his head and swallowed all the doubts in his heart back into his stomach. Xiao Qing calmly tied Mu Lianchuan into a ball and threw him into the car with a pile of messy things. If it weren't for the many doubts that hadn't been solved, she would have directly killed Mu Lianchuan. After eating, they went on the road again. Mulin had been very curious. Is his situation the same as yours? Are there a lot of zombies like him? Logically speaking, there shouldn't be. I don't know what his situation is. We can only let Yan Chiua study it carefully when we take a break. Xiao Qing said softly, I always feel that he hid the most important part. His origin is not simple. Mulin nodded and then took the opportunity to say, Qing, look, it's not easy to meet a good man. In the end, he's not a living person. Does this mean that I'm not destined to be with a man? You don't have to find one for me. Xiao Qing gently touched the back of her head and said, there are always good men. Don't be discouraged. Who hasn't met a few scumbags? Mulin was directly discouraged. She bit her handkerchief and sobbed. Why did Xiao Qing have to try so hard to find a partner for her? Not a few perverts. She really didn't want it. The group of people packed up and then continued to move forward. After turning a corner and going around the town in front, they continued to walk. Until the sky gradually turned dark, they still didn't see any place to stay. Not to mention a survivor base, there wasn't even a place to shelter from the wind and rain. They could only directly set up camp and then set up a few tents. Just when the tents were set up and they hadn't cooked, a group of mutant monkeys suddenly fell from the sky. These mutant monkeys looked like zombies. The rotten flesh on their faces fell down when they moved, which looked particularly disgusting. This group of mutant monkeys came very suddenly, without warning. Even Xiao Qing didn't notice how they came. After dealing with this group of particularly disgusting mutant monkeys with great difficulty, Xiao Qing said, Go and see if Mu Lianchuan is still in the carriage. Yan Chiua opened the carriage and looked inside. Sure enough, there were only a few vines lying on the ground. Just as she thought, it was a diversion. Sure enough, there was a mastermind behind it. Chapter 590. There was really no one else who could encounter such a scheme while traveling. Xiao Qing patted her head and said, No need to look for them anymore. They must have run away. Anyway, we're full. Let's go. The others did not object and continued to walk forward with her. Xiao Qing originally thought that this matter was over. The person in the dark would be scheming and would not make a move immediately. However, the fact was that not long after they left, they met another person. This time it was a woman. She was holding a small bag in her arms and looked pitiful. She came over and asked, Can I borrow some water? I've been walking for a day and have not found a water source. I really have no strength. Xiao Qing did not say anything and directly stabbed her. The woman made a fake exclamation and then dodged. She said with a wronged face, I just want to drink water. Do you have to treat me like this? Xiao Qing looked at her coldly. After a long while, she had an expression that said, Oh, I admit defeat. Then she said, Little Chun Chun is right. You are really not a simple person. Sure enough, she knew Mu Lianchuan. This group of people should be in the same group. The power behind them was not simple. They all had the smell of zombies. It was very obvious. Where did this group of people come from? They looked very powerful. This woman was like Mu Lianchuan and even somewhat similar to Xiao Qing. Then the question was, who arranged them? The woman hugged her small bag and said, Actually, I am just passing by. You can talk slowly. She wanted to run, but the vines that had been lingering under her feet for a long time quickly drilled out and formed a huge vine whip, which was thrown at her face. The vine whip whistled through the air, looking very ferocious. It fell towards her head. The woman's expression changed. She quickly leaped into the air and dodged the whip. But then, another vine whip drilled out from the ground and caught her off guard. In a moment of carelessness, the bundle in the woman's hand was whipped away. Her expression changed drastically. She actually ignored the vine whip that was whipping her and flew up to catch the bundle. The outer layer of the bag had been broken. After all, it was just the most ordinary cloth. It could not withstand Xiao Qing's attack, and then the thing inside was exposed. It was a skull. Looking at the size of the skull, it should belong to an adult. The woman hugged the skull very carefully. Large pieces of flesh on her face and body were taken away by the vine whip. She seemed to be completely unaware and only cared about whether the skull in her arms was damaged or not. Probably, because of luck, The skull was intact. The woman breathed a sigh of relief and hugged the skull tightly. She did not stay for another minute. Xiaoqing calmly watched her escape and said, "It is indeed different. Look at the wound on her face. The skin part is good, but the flesh under the skin still looks like rotten meat that has been left for a long time. Once the skin is not protected, it is all exposed. For example, she and Dummy were the same on the outside and inside. Although there was still little blood in their bodies were not active, and their hearts could not beat. At least under their skin, there was normal flesh. Unlike this woman, there was rotten flesh under her skin, just like the painted skin in the story of Strange Stories from a Chinese studio. Their human-like appearance is fake, but it can be seen that they have intelligence and memory. They are very similar to humans. I just don't know how strong they are." Mu Lin touched his chin and said, "At their level, it is easy for them to sneak into the survival base." Chapter 591. They're probably at level 6, definitely not at level 7. I'm not sure about the specifics. After all, we haven't had a life-and-death battle, Xiaoqing said calmly. She felt that something was wrong. The feeling that these two people gave her was very strange. It didn't feel like they had risen to level 6 on their own. Instead, it felt like they had gone through a special accelerated method to reach their current strength. Therefore, their strength was actually a little weaker than that of ordinary level 6 zombies. However, their intelligence made up for it. Then the question was, who had the ability to mass-produce level 6 zombies? If someone could really do it, it would undoubtedly be a nightmare for human beings. After all, it was very difficult for human beings to reach level 6. However, the zombies that could be mass-produced were still at level 6 even if their strength was a little weaker. If there was a limit to the production, and it couldn't be mass-produced, it would be fine. However, if it could be mass-produced, Xiaoqing could already see the future of human beings. I can feel a special kind of energy fluctuation from them. Yan Qiue frowned and said, "This kind of energy fluctuation gives me a very familiar feeling, but I can't tell what it is. I'm just worried that they're really targeting us." They were quite arrogant in the post-apocalyptic world, but their enemies should be human beings. Most of them were already dead. Why would a nest of zombies suddenly jump out and make trouble for them? They didn't have anything that could make those zombies covet them. I can't think of anything. We'll just deal with whatever comes our way. Xiaoqing wasn't afraid of anything. Yan Qiue nodded. Although they continued to move forward, everyone was vigilant. They didn't feel like they were just having fun like before. When it was almost dark, they arrived at a small forest. This place was very good and very suitable for resting. If they wanted food, they had food and shelter. Their strength was high enough, so they were not worried about encountering any danger in the forest, so they stopped to rest. They didn't encounter anything during the meal. At night, Xiaoqing didn't sleep as usual. Instead, Dai guarded the first half of the night while she guarded the second half. She let Mu Lin and Yan Qiue rest. Although Dai guarded the first half of the night, Xiaoqing didn't actually sleep. She laid in the tent and opened her 5 senses to listen to the surrounding sounds. She sensed if anyone was approaching. She had an indescribable feeling that tonight wouldn't be so quiet. When night came, she couldn't sleep. After lying in bed for half a day, she got out of the tent and sat with Dai. As soon as she sat down, she heard a faint rustling sound in the wind. It seemed like something was coming. She pricked up her ears and listened carefully. The sound was getting closer and closer. It should not be just one person or more than one thing. Dai also noticed it. He opened his eyes wide and stared cautiously at the night in the distance. "Can you feel what it is?" Xiaoqing asked softly. "It might be the monkey we met today. Anyway, it's very small," Dai whispered. As soon as he finished speaking, he was stunned. Dai, or more accurately, he was now Fu Jingxian. He seemed to have exposed something just now. Fu Jingxian secretly looked at Xiaoqing's side profile. She didn't have any extra expression on her face. She was very calm, as if she didn't notice his abnormality just now. However, the more calm she was, the more Fu Jingxian couldn't calm down. He felt that Xiaoqing was abnormal. Xiaoqing was a very attentive person. How could she not notice that he spoke so fluently just now? Chapter 592. Xiaoqing listened carefully for a long time. The faint sound was getting closer and closer. It was almost in front of them. "Get ready to fight," Xiaoqing said in a low voice. Fu Jingxia nodded and got ready to fight. In fact, he was a little nervous because his fighting instincts were not as good as Dai's. After Doomsday, he had been in a deep sleep. His strength really belonged to Dai, so it was normal for him to be unfamiliar with it. If he was exposed during the fight, the loss would outweigh the gain. "Follow behind me," Xiaoqing said, and released Guangguang to guard the tent. Then he released the big flower and vines. A minute later, a bunch of strange creatures appeared in front of them. There were monkeys that they had encountered during the day, and a large number of zombie rats. Zombie rats were probably the most dangerous existence to ordinary people after the apocalypse. Although they were not strong individually, they were small in size. Even if they sneaked into a survivor base, they would not be discovered. As long as they bit an ordinary person, they would turn that person into a zombie. After Doomsday, there were many bases where ordinary people were checked before entering. Normally, they would not be turned into zombies. However, they were turned into zombies. After investigation, it was found that it was done by zombie rats. If that was the case, they were not dangerous. After all, they were not a threat to paranormals. However, in addition to their small size, they had another characteristic, which was that they lived in groups. One zombie rat might not be able to defeat a paranormal, but what about a group of them? Ants could even kill an elephant. Moreover, the gap between them and paranormals was not the same as the gap between ants and elephants. No matter how powerful the paranormals were, they would not be able to withstand the attacks of a large group of zombie rats who were not afraid of death. Most of the paranormals would probably end up with their superpowers exhausted, and then they would be gnawed into bones. In addition to the monkeys and rats, there were also a small number of snakes and mosquitoes. Mosquitoes were more dangerous to ordinary people. After all, they were too small and liked to suck blood. The reason why they were not as lethal as zombie rats was that after Doomsday, very few mosquitoes became zombies. However, there were several zombified mosquitoes here. They all stayed on the trees and hid in the leaves. If one didn't look carefully, there was no way to find them. Rather than saying that they would participate in the battle, it was better to say that they were more like surveillance cameras. The snakes here are all very large pythons. They can be directly used to act in horror movies about snakes eating people. Moreover, each of them looks very ugly. The snake skin is tattered and covered with a layer of greasy liquid. It's dirty and challenging people's patience. Xiaoqing took a deep breath. It was not because of anything else but purely because she was disgusted. After the apocalypse, she had seen many disgusting things, but she had never seen anything so disgusting, especially that layer of oily liquid. She couldn't imagine that she would have to deal with it immediately. In addition to being disgusted, she became more vigilant. Created high-level zombies with human appearances, zombified animals. How many tricks did the enemy have that they had not shown? She seemed to be able to see someone hiding behind the scenes, sneering at her. "Let's kill them first." Xiaoqing calmly woke up the two sleeping people and then took the lead. Although she was disgusted by the ugly appearance of the zombie snakes, she had to deal with them first. Because these things were the most lethal, she couldn't leave them to Mu Lin and the others. Xiaoqing was very fast. She tied up several big snakes first. Mu Lin and Yan Qiyu just climbed out of the tent and were stunned. Especially Mu Lin. She was so shocked that she jumped and shouted, "Oh my God, I thought I was in an amusement park at the end of the world. Why are they all so ugly?"
Come and work.
Xiaoqing waved her hand and said, "This assassination attempt came too suddenly. I keep having the feeling that their goal isn't that simple. Let's end this quickly and deal with these things before slowly studying them. Mu Lin, you and Qiyu stand behind me. You don't have to go forward. Just do your best to capture those who are alone." The two nodded. Their superpowers, One was air manipulation and the other was mental, so they were both considered long-range. If they were a mage in a game, they would be the most suitable profession to stand at the back. Their lethality was not small. Start working. Xiaoqing endured the uneasiness in her heart and decisively took action. Chapter 593. The four of them cooperated well. Although Mu Lin was a psychic paranormal, all of her abilities were focused on attacking, creating illusions, and so on. She had completely given up on defense. This probably had something to do with her personality. Although Mu Lin and Xiaoqing appeared soft and gentle when they were together, Xiaoqing was actually a very tough person. Therefore, all of her abilities were related to attacking. Therefore, Yan Qiyu created an air barrier to protect the two sides and the back to prevent sneak attacks. The two of them were responsible for the monkeys, Xiaoqing was responsible for the snakes and rats, and Fu Jingshen was only responsible for protecting Xiaoqing. The most disgusting thing was the rats. They were too small, and they were simply everywhere. They were not easy to fight, and there were so many of them. After killing some more would come out. It was as if there was no end to them, and it was really tiring. Xiaoqing had a headache when dealing with these little guys. Her vines could only wrap around a few rats at a time because the rats would run away when they saw the vines. It was impossible for them to stand in a straight line and let her hit them. She had an advantage when it came to fighting the bigger ones, but she had no advantage when dealing with the smaller ones. Mu Lin was the same. Her psychic paranormal could directly attack the human brain. When dealing with zombies, she would directly attack their nuclei. However, there were so many rats and they were so small that she could not even count how many of them there were, let alone attack their nuclei. Fortunately, Yan Qiyue's air barrier was there. Even if the rats crawled in front of them, they would be blocked by the air barrier. They could only lie on the barrier and squeak while gnawing on it. After fighting for a while, Xiaoqing felt that something was wrong. These zombies only looked scary, but they could not cause any harm to them. Was it the person behind the scenes who sent them to test their strength? Xiaoqing felt that something was wrong. First, if it was really a test, the previous two people should be enough to measure their strength. If it was not a test, it couldn't be that they were here to play a game with them, right?
Who would be so bored?
She always felt that the person behind the scenes was very interesting. Usually, when one was hiding in the dark and facing an enemy in the open, shouldn't one carry out a more confident sneak attack? This person actually came to test her openly time and time again. Usually, there were only two possibilities in this situation. First, that person was mentally retarded. Second, he was very confident in his own strength. Xiaoqing felt that the first possibility was more likely. After thinking about it, Xiaoqing suddenly thought of a terrifying possibility. The enemy was not retarded, and these zombie animals were not the main force. Their purpose was to stall her and her little friends. If that was the case, then it would be really troublesome because the other party's target was very likely her headquarters. Clean up this mess. Xiaoqing said coldly, "We need to return immediately." If it was really as she thought, then the person who was secretly targeting her was really a very scheming person. Although the others hadn't figured out the reason, they immediately didn't hold back and attacked with all their strength, clearing a path. "Air Dai, you go and get the car." Xiaoqing used vines to sweep away the rats that were trying to get close, then said. Fu Jingshen responded, then stiffened and looked at Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing's eyes were black and white, and there was no emotion in them. Fu Jingshen felt that his cold hands and feet were even colder. Chapter 594. He drove the car out silently, and they quickly got into the car. At the same time, Yan Qiyu used an air barrier to protect the whole car. Fu Jingshen stepped on the accelerator, and the car sped forward. Some of the zombie rats and even monkeys in front of the car were directly run over. After they rushed out of the encirclement, Xiaoqing slowly told them about her guests. After the apocalypse, it was no longer as convenient to contact as before. Although there were communication devices similar to mobile phones, if they wanted to communicate, they had to be within the range of a signal tower. There were very few signal towers in the country. Currently, there were only a few bases with signal towers. There were no signal towers in Jiang City, and there were no signal towers in the place where they were now. Therefore, it was impossible to contact their family quickly. They would only know if their family had been attacked when they returned to Jiang City. No matter what, we have to go back. Even if it's just a guess, we have to go back. They are all at home. If something happens to them, none of us can bear the consequences. I'd rather make an extra trip to make sure they are fine. Xiao Qing gritted her teeth and said, "Don't be afraid, Ah Qing.
They will be fine.
Don't forget that before we left, we planted all kinds of mutated plants around Jiang City with Tang Tianda. Even if the enemy is very strong, it won't be easy for them to break through the defense of the mutated plants and deal with the people and zombies in Jiang City," Yan Qiwa analyzed clearly. "I hope so." Xiao Qing's face was expressionless, but she couldn't hide the nervousness and anxiety in her heart. Even in the midst of danger, she could still remain calm. However, if the ones in danger were her family, she wouldn't be able to remain calm. Because of her anxiety, they went back very quickly. During the day and night, they took turns to drive and didn't stop. During the day, Yan Qiwa and Mu Lin drove, while at night, Xiao Qing and Fu Jingshan drove. When one of them drove, the other three rested. Unless it was necessary, the car wouldn't stop. They even ate in the car. At this time, they didn't care about enjoying themselves. Speed was the prerequisite for everything. Usually when the car stopped, it was because Yan Qiwa and Mu Lin needed to go to the toilet. It couldn't be done in the car. The mountain path was particularly rugged. When the car was driving, it was fine if it was slow, but if it was fast, it would make people dizzy and nauseous. But no one cared about this. The car drove as if it was about to fly. In addition to the rugged mountain path, there was another characteristic, which was that it was very narrow. If a narrow car didn't drive well, the wheels might fall into the ravines on both sides. It would be impossible to pass two cars. Moreover, they could only walk down one path to the end. There was no turning back. Therefore, when Xiao Qing saw the car driving slowly in front of her, she wanted to hit them and send them flying. Although she was a little irritable because of anxiety and nervousness, she was still rational. She asked Yan Qiwa to press the horn to urge the person in front to hurry up. The car in front was still moving slowly, so it was only slightly faster than walking. Xiao Qing was expressionless, but she couldn't hide the anger in her eyes. Yan Qiwa kept on honking. After about a dozen honks, the window of the car in front of them rolled down. A head popped out and scolded, "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. Are you in a hurry to go to hell?" Not to mention Xiao Qing, even Yan Qiwa was a little angry. He said calmly, "Kill them." Xiao Qing looked at the width of the road in front of them. It was indeed impossible to overtake them, but she wasn't a very irritable person. She was prepared to use peaceful means before resorting to force. She also stuck her head out and said, "We are in a hurry. Something happened at home. Can you drive faster?" It was probably a woman who heard the voice. A few heads popped out of the window. Some whistled and some shouted, "So it's a little girl. Are you in a hurry to go back and see your man? Don't be in a hurry. It's better if you die. You can live with us brothers. We don't have wives anyway." After he finished speaking, the people in the car began to laugh. Xiao Qing was very calm. She had already done the ritual, but they still didn't know what was good for them. Naturally, she didn't want to give them any more chances. "Stop the car." Xiao Qing rolled up her sleeves slightly. She was the first to open the door and get out of the car. As soon as she opened the door, the car in front of her also stopped. The group of people laughed and said, "Little girl, have you thought it through and decided to come and join us?" After Xiao Qing got out of the car, Mu Lin and Fu Jingshan followed her. Xiao Qing was very calm. Then she walked to the car in front of her. The people in the car also got out one after another. There were 5 people in total, and they should all be paranormals. The leader was about level 5. No wonder he was so arrogant. High-level paranormals were usually in a mercenary group or a large base. Not to mention in a small base, even in a mercenary group, a level 5 paranormals were very powerful. Although Xiao Qing didn't take them seriously, She did understand why they were so confident. The thinnest of the five smiled mischievously and said, "So there are two girls. You two take a look and see if there's anyone you like in our group. If there's anyone you like, then come with us. If there isn't, then it doesn't matter. In any case, you'll have to come with us." "There shouldn't be anyone in the car." Mulin glanced at them and said. Fu Jingxin was very annoyed because someone dared to flirt with Xiao Qing in front of him. He sneered and kicked the empty car directly into the ditch. The ditch was very deep. Although there was no water in the ditch, it was not easy to get out. Besides, when the car fell into the ditch, the body of the car would definitely be injured. Their car was most likely destroyed. The few people immediately got angry. At first, they just wanted to flirt with Xiao Qing and didn't mean anything else. Later, when they saw Xiao Qing and Mu Lin, they realized that they were really beautiful, so they wanted to do something that they shouldn't have. They didn't expect that the two girls, one hotter than the other, would destroy their car directly. The leader's face darkened, and then he said, "You want to do it the hard way? We only wanted two girls, but now we want two girls and a car. You can't leave them here." He was also rather proud of himself because he was a 5th grade Earth Elemental Warrior. In this kind of mountain path full of dirt, his ability would be even more effective. If it was in normal times, Xiao Qing would probably let Mu Lin and the others practice. Now, she just wanted to deal with this group of people quickly and go home. Chapter 595. Therefore, Xiao Qing made the first move. She didn't do anything else but release her aura of a level 7 paranormal. In novels, when an invisible aura pressed down on a person, it could even make the person feel as if a mountain was pressing down on him. This was not a bluff, but a fact. The reflection and reality were that many people would have some similar emotions like fear and restraint when they saw some superiors who looked more dignified. It was the same. However, this kind of reaction was magnified. They would be scared, stiff, and even unable to move. Then, Xiao Qing threw everyone into the ditch. She was too lazy to even kill people. After killing people, she still had to wash her hands, which was a waste of her time. "Keep going," Xiao Qing said expressionlessly. The car behind them came. They got into the car and drove all the way. Before leaving, Mu Lin sneered and did something more cruel. She used her spiritual power to block the nerves in a certain part of their body. In other words, from now on, they could no longer get hard. This was a kind of punishment for their loose tongues, so that they would not harm girls in the future. The men lay in the ditch, stunned. The thinnest one swallowed and whispered, "That aura. It should be a level 6 paranormal." The leader said with a dull look, "Impossible. I've met a level 6 paranormal before, but a level 5 paranormal shouldn't be so powerful." "Boss, you didn't even have the ability to resist," another man said hurriedly. The leader murmured, "It could be a level 7. When the rest of the men heard this, they all swallowed and felt their legs go weak. They had just teased a level 7 paranormal. A level 7, there should be only a handful of level 7 paranormal in the whole country. It was even possible that this was the only level 7 paranormal in the whole country. What on earth did they do? A level 7. How powerful is that? The thin man widened his eyes and couldn't help but swallow. The boss said self-deprecatingly, "This almighty must have something urgent to do, so she didn't lower herself to our level. If she cared about what we said just now, we might have been lying on the ground forever." He sighed and said, "It's easy for a level 7 paranormal to kill us. We didn't even have a chance to struggle. We were really short-sighted. We thought we could do whatever we wanted just because we reached level 5. There's always someone better than us. We were lucky this time. Let's learn from our mistakes." The others nodded. Even the weakest among them was a level 3 metahuman. They thought they could hold their heads high, but it was because of this arrogance that made them speak so presumptuously. Fortunately, they were lucky and managed to keep their lives. Not to mention the future of these people, Xiao Qing, and the others were actually uncomfortable from the bumpy ride, but none of them said anything. They all gritted their teeth and rushed back as fast as they could. Xiaoqing's family and friends were also their family and friends. None of them was not worried. They kept rushing day and night, and it took them half the time to reach Jiang City. They didn't encounter any resistance along the way, which made Xiaoqing doubt her own guess. When they were close to Jiang City, everyone was exhausted. Even Xiaoqing and Dai, who had strong constitutions, couldn't stand it, let alone two normal people. Chapter 596. Let's rest for a while, Xiaoqing said softly. Rest for half an hour and eat something, then we'll go back. Mulin gritted his teeth and said, I'm fine. I'm not hungry either. Let's go back first. We're all exhausted now. If there's really an enemy attack after we go back, we can't do anything except become a burden. Let's rest for a while and recover our energy. There might be a fierce battle later, Xiaoqing said calmly. She asked someone to stop the car and took out some dry food. She ate a little with water. The dry food was hard, and those with bad teeth couldn't even chew it. The water was also cold, so it didn't have much of an effect on the dry food. No one spoke when they stopped to eat because they were all too tired. Although they took turns to drive, they couldn't sleep well in the car and would wake up at the slightest movement. On the way here, they were so tired that they almost fell asleep while driving. Later on, Xiaoqing was the one who drove the most. Dai didn't drive during the day. Only at night, when he was Fu Jingshan, would he drive. When Mu Lin and the others were too tired, Xiaoqing would take over. Out of the 24 hours in a day, Xiaoqing would be the one driving for at least 10 hours. So Xiaoqing was the most tired among them. Xiaoqing just didn't show it. She wanted to hold up half the sky for her family and be the tall person who would hold up the sky even if it fell. After passing through the valley, they could get on the highway to Jiang City. When they got on the highway, the road would be much easier. When they were about to reach the narrow valley, Xiaoqing, who had recovered from the short rest, sensed that something was wrong. Stop the car first. What's wrong? Mu Lin, who was driving, quickly stopped the car. Xiaoqing got out of the car and observed carefully. Then she sneered. When I was still in the survival base in S City, I received a mission to go to another base. I passed by a similar valley. At that time, someone dug a pit, and one of our cars was trapped. Mulin stuck his head out of the car window and narrowed his eyes. You're saying that someone set a trap in front? If you look carefully, you'll see that there's a patch of soil in front. The color looks relatively new. It's similar to the road here. Who knows how many people walk on it and step on it? How can the color of the soil be this newly renovated color? Xiaoqing pointed at a spot and said, although the color of this place is not very different from other places, if you look carefully, you can still see it. It can only deceive those careless people. Mu Lin's mouth twitched. Then he said, other than you, who would observe the color of the soil while driving? What should we do now? There are two possibilities. First, it's an ordinary bandit who is trapped and robbed here. Second, the people who are targeting us have finally arrived. They want to stop us from going back. Xiaoqing said softly, this is the vicinity of Jiang City. Zombies are rampant and there are no robbers at all. If they dare to settle down here, then there is only the second possibility. If it is really the second possibility, then they have indeed attacked Jiang City. Maybe they have two goals. If we can find out that they have attacked Jiang City and return, then it is best because we are tired from the journey, and it is the best opportunity for them to attack. If we don't find out, then it is okay. They have enough time to break into Jiang City and the people inside won't threaten us. No matter which one, it is a good choice for them. Mu Lin sneered. Then they've miscalculated. Whether it's us or Jiang City, we're not easy to deal with. We're two tough bones. Either one can bite off their teeth. Everyone, get ready. The battle is about to start. Xiaoqing released her two flowers and let them sit on the car, ready for battle. Then they drove the car over. When they arrived at the pit, everyone walked down. Mu Lin even naughtily stretched out his hand and poked the layer of soil above the trap. The people who had been waiting in the dark for a long time saw the situation. If they still didn't know that Xiaoqing had seen through their trap, then they were really retarded. The ambushers who had been lying in ambush for a long time immediately came down from both sides of the mountain. The leader was the woman who was holding the skull. There was also a little boy who looked a little ugly. The reason why he was ugly was because he had freckles and buck teeth. He was short and his limbs were thick and short. If he stuck in the ground with only his yellow hair, he would look like a carrot. Carrot sat on a 2-meter-tall gorilla. They looked like a beast. In addition to these two people, there were countless strange things behind them. For example, there was a monster with a human head and a snake body that could spit fire. There was also a giant spider. When it jumped down from the mountain, the human face on its abdomen was exposed. There were also countless normal high-level zombies and mutated animals. Xiaoqing inserted Guangguang and was the first to attack. The vines were like long whips, whistling past and hitting a high-level zombie. The zombie's head was directly whipped away. When the zombie's body fell down, its head was still spinning in the air like a small top. After hitting the target, the vine in Xiaoqing's hand turned into a long snake. It was as if it was alive. It slithered around and looked for prey. Once it found the prey's weakness, it would immediately bite it. Big Flower and Little Flower were not willing to be left behind. They tied up Little Flower and ate Big Flower. They were simply invincible. Air Dai and the others immediately joined the battle. Among them, the most ferocious one was probably Yan Qiyu. Because those who died in his hands were either squeezed into a meat patty or turned into a human firework. Bang! That kind of thing. Xiaoqing didn't want to be entangled with them. After all, the most important thing was the people at home. She tried to end the battle quickly, but the opponents didn't give her a chance. They were playing a war of attrition with her. Xiaoqing didn't have any expression at all. She didn't even look angry. She wantonly slaughtered the high-level zombies and mutated animals, trying to eliminate them directly. She was so ruthless that almost no zombies or mutated animals could be her opponent. Soon, more than half of the enemies on the scene had disappeared, but most of them were killed by Xiaoqing. The ugly boy and the woman holding the skull, who had been commanding the zombies, couldn't sit still anymore. They screamed and pounced on Xiaoqing. Chapter 597. The ugly little boy screamed as soon as he came up. His scream was sharp and unpleasant, but that was not the point. The point was that his scream was accompanied by sound waves. If there was glass in front of him, it might have been completely broken. The moment the sound waves spread over, Yan Qiyu reacted quickly by erecting an air barrier. However, the barrier only lasted for a few seconds before it cracked and broke. Mu Lin's face changed. Although she was a psychic paranormal, she did not have a defensive ability, so she subconsciously used her own psychic attack. The psychic paranormal collided with the sound waves. In an instant, the invisible collision was like a powerful bomb exploding. The whistling wind almost blew people down. When the smoke dissipated, there was only a big pit left on the ground. There were many zombies around, but they were blown up and only had broken limbs left. Mu Lin breathed a sigh of relief. She was afraid that Xiaoqing would be hurt, so she made up her mind to find a way to develop a defensive ability. In the past, she did not have anyone or anything to protect. She only focused on advancing. Now it was different. She had Xiaoqing. She had someone to protect, so she could not be like before. Xiaoqing did not say anything. She pointed at the ugly little boy, and the big flower that was ready to attack immediately rushed over. The moment it rushed over, the flower opened its head, and a shallow, transparent gas was sprayed out. Even though the ugly little boy was a high-level zombie, he could not help but feel dizzy. Although it was only for a moment, it was enough for the big flower to take him down. The big flower closed its bud, and a human figure could be seen in the bud. It was constantly struggling, but the big flower did not move. It was constantly grinding its petals, trying to digest the human in its stomach. The first reaction of the woman who was holding the skull was to save the little boy. However, The big flower had been with Xiaoqing for a long time and had become a flower spirit. As soon as it succeeded, it began to run back. Little Blossom, who was right behind her, quickly extended his tentacles to stop the woman. The two flowers cooperated very well. By the time the woman broke through Little Blossom's obstruction, Big Blossom had already run behind Xiaoqing. The high-level zombie in its stomach kept struggling, and the corrosive solution couldn't completely corrode it in a short period of time. Even if the zombie lost its arms and legs, it could still struggle to move, not to mention that it was just some flesh that had been corroded. The big flower had difficulty digesting, and sometimes it was so anxious that it jumped on the spot. Xiaoqing saw this and calmly opened the big flower's petals. She reached in and pinched the little boy's head. At the moment when he was about to explode, she crushed his head. The prey stopped struggling. The big flower shook its head contentedly and began to digest the prey in its stomach. The woman who was holding the skull saw that the situation was not good, so she turned and ran. She did not even stop her. As soon as the woman ran, those strange-looking creatures also ran. As soon as they left, the remaining soldiers were no longer a problem. Xiaoqing and the others quickly cleared all the ambushing soldiers and then continued to move forward. These high-level zombies were really human-like. It was just that they did not know if they had memories. Xiaoqing threw away the thoughts in her mind and quickly rushed to Jiang City. When they were near Jiang City, they saw zombies and beasts from afar, surrounding the city. However, they could not get close because there were all kinds of mutated plants near the city walls. These mutated plants were very fierce. For example, the vines could easily whip the zombies and beasts far away. There were also blood-sucking vines and other plants guarding. For a while, the zombies could not do anything to the plants at the outermost layer. Even if they broke the outermost layer of the city walls, it did not matter. The zombies in the city were not to be trifled with. Chapter 598. Yi had already gathered all the zombies in the city, and they were ready to attack at the inner city wall. As long as they got close, the zombies would rush up. Jiang City was like a natural stronghold. It couldn't be more difficult to take it down. Xiaoqing heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, nothing happened. She was relieved to see that Jiang City was fine. She had already thought of the worst result along the way. She was already mentally prepared. She didn't expect that what appeared in front of her was the best result. Xiaoqing was very satisfied now. At least her family was fine. That was the best thing. When they arrived outside Jiang City, the zombies and beasts seemed to have received an order. They retreated like the tide. It was very orderly. Xiaoqing's face was expressionless as he looked at the army of zombies and beasts that were slowly retreating. Although he was surprised in his heart, he was even more afraid. Who was secretly controlling everything? Why was this person targeting her? Was he her enemy? Or did he have other intentions? No matter what, one thing was certain. The person in the dark was her enemy. Xiaoqing led her companions into the city. On both sides of the city walls, there were many zombie beasts tied up by vampiric vines and other plants. They had all been injected with some kind of anesthetic and were hanging peacefully on the city walls. These were all very good research materials. Yan Qiue could go back and study them to find out why they were controlled by humans. When Xiaoqing arrived at the city gate, it had already opened automatically. Xiao Tong was the first to rush over, followed by Little Bun. There was no fear on her face, only determination. Little Tong has grown up. Xiaoqing sighed and touched her head. Yan Hanqing and the others were still transporting vegetables outside. They didn't know that Jiang City was attacked. Only Xiao Tong was at home. Although Yi was helping, it was already very good that Xiao Tong could hold up half the sky. You did well this time. My little Tong is getting better and better. After Xiaoqing sighed, she carried Little Bun in her arms. Little Bun had become quite wild under her care during this period of time. He played everywhere and had become the big brother of Jiang City. After entering Xiaoqing's arms, the Little Bun acted like a spoiled child. Mama, let me tell you something. A strange-looking uncle came to me and said that he wanted to take me out to play, but I didn't go. I'm very obedient, right? Xiao Qing narrowed her eyes. Listening to Little Bun's description, it seemed that before the zombies and beasts besieged the city, someone had already contacted Little Bun. However, for some reason, Little Bun rejected them. They didn't dare to use violence. Xiao Qing breathed a sigh of relief, and then said, Bao Bao did the right thing. If you meet a stranger who wants to take you away, you must not agree, because they're very likely to be bad people. After they take you away, you will never see your mother again. The Little Bun hugged Xiao Qing tightly and said, I'm very obedient. I'll go with them. Bao Bao is so obedient. Xiao Qing sighed and then said, Little Tong, let's go in first.
Don't just stand at the door.
Is Yi here? Xiao Tong hurriedly used her mind to tell her. Brother Yi is in the laboratory. Xiao Qing handed Little Bun to Xiao Tong and then said, I'll go to the laboratory first. Take Little Bun home and stay there. I'll be back in a while. Xiao Tong nodded and then took Little Bun home. Xiao Qing took her little friend to the laboratory. For many zombies in Jiang City, the laboratory was a nightmare. They were turned from ordinary people and superpowered people into zombies in the laboratory. However, even if Yi was doing research, he would never do it inside. At this moment, there were only two people in the laboratory. One was Yi, and the other was Little Yu. Little Yu was lying next to the laboratory table, openly watching Yi do the experiment. His eyes were rolling around curiously. Yi would occasionally touch his head, but most of the time, he was immersed in his research. When Xiao Qing came over, he was patiently studying something. He only reacted when Xiao Qing patted him on the shoulder. He hurriedly said, You're back? You're back early. I received news that someone had bad intentions towards Jiang City, so I hurriedly rushed back. I didn't expect you to deal with it better than I expected. Xiao Qing said calmly, Is everything okay in Jiang Cities? Yi shook his head. It's fine. It's very good. Only then did Xiao Qing hand over the zombie beasts that she had plucked from the city wall, as well as the half-zombie that Dehua had spat out, to Yi. Then, she said, On the way back, I also encountered an assassination attempt. The other party seemed to have many high-level zombies. I want you and Chiue to see what method the person in the dark used to mass-produce high-level zombies and control them. Yi was originally a research fanatic. When he saw the corpses on the ground, he was interested. Leave it to me and Chiue. We'll definitely get the results in 3 days. Yan Chiue held Xiao Qing's chin and kissed her, then said, After you go back, take a bath and have a good rest. You must be exhausted from the journey. Have a good sleep, or else my heart will ache.
Xiao Qing also said, You too.
Don't study immediately. Rest first and leave it to Yi. After you've rested, you can help again. Okay. Yan Chiue was happy in his heart. He said softly, I definitely won't tire my body out. After all, you were the one who nurtured my body bit by bit. How can I destroy your results? Quickly go back and rest. I want to eat porridge. When you wake up, make it for me. Okay, I'll send it to you when it's done. It's very simple to make porridge. I'll make it before I take a bath and let Xiao Tong watch over it. When the porridge is done, I'll ask her to send it to you. You can eat it with Yi. After showing off their love for a long time, Xiao Qing only remembered that Yi was beside her when she was about to leave. She casually mentioned it. Yi said sourly, Are you bullying me because I'm single? This show of love can be smelled from dozens of miles away. It's so sweet that it's sickening.
All right.
Those who should rest, rest. Those who should work, go back to work. Don't provoke me here. Xiao Qing raised her eyebrows and said lightly, How many zombies are there in Jiang City? There should be a few good-looking ones. Do you want me to pick 2 to warm your bed? Yi's face turned green. Scram. Hurry up and scram. Before Xiao Qing left, she said, To be honest, I'll pick a few for you. Scram as far as you can. Yi roared. Chapter 599. After cooking the porridge, Xiaoqing slept for the entire day. From sunrise to sunset, she slept all the way until midnight before waking up. When she stretched her body, she could hear her bones cracking. All her fatigue was chased away. That feeling was very good. Xiaoqing opened the door and prepared to wash her face. It was the middle of the night, but if she were to sleep again, she definitely wouldn't be able to fall asleep. Just as she walked to the sink, Xiaoqing saw Erdai supporting himself with both hands on the sink and looking at himself in the mirror expressionlessly. Sometimes, Xiaoqing would think that people should be a little muddle-headed sometimes. Only by turning a blind eye to things would they be able to live a happier life. However, the person who didn't want to be muddle-headed was Fu Jingshan. He raised his head and glanced at Xiaoqing before asking, "When did you find out?" "I know you too well. That's why I sensed that something was wrong from the start." Xiaoqing wasn't going to pretend to be muddle-headed anymore. She calmly said, "At the start, I couldn't be sure. But after interacting with you for a long time, the cat was out of the bag." "When did you recover?" "The last time I had a breakthrough, I felt like I had a very, very long dream. In the dream, I saw myself getting to know you and experiencing everything like a bystander," Fu Jingshan said softly. That feeling was very strange, but it was also very good. Xiaoqing searched her body and found her cigarette box. She took out the last cigarette and lit it. The smoke that filled the air blurred her facial features and covered her expression. Even her voice sounded a little ethereal. "If you want to leave, let me know in advance so that I can be prepared." There was something that Xiaoqing didn't say. She was going to make a good chain to lock him up. If it was a year ago, she would probably choose to let go. After all, a melon that was forcefully picked would not be sweet. However, a year later, even if she broke Fu Jingshan's legs and locked him up, she wouldn't let him leave. Even if this melon was bitter, she would slowly taste it, bite it carefully, and eat it bit by bit. "I won't leave," Fu Jingshan said instinctively. After saying this, he was stunned for a moment before he slowly said, "I haven't fully recovered yet. At night, I'll regain my memory. During the day, I'll become Erdai again." Xiaoqing responded softly, her voice carrying a hint of unhappiness. It seemed that the matter of making the chain had to be brought forward. Otherwise, she wouldn't know when she ran away. It would be more reassuring to lock it up. Just like in those stories and TV dramas where people said, "I love you, so I let go. As long as you're happy, it's fine." Those who were so selfless would usually be single for the rest of their lives and suffer for the rest of their lives. Xiaoqing didn't want to be a good person. She just needed to be selfish. Even if Fu Jingshan hated her in the future, it didn't matter. This was probably what they meant by husband and wife singing together. After being together with a pervert for a long time, one would really become a pervert. And it's all Yan Qiue's fault, Xiaoqing thought shamelessly. Fu Jingshan held it in for a long time before he slowly said, "Erdai loves you." He was a little thin-skinned. The confession was at the tip of his tongue, but he swallowed it back down. Instead, it became this sentence. This sentence actually meant, "Erdai loves you. Erdai and I are the same person, so I love you too. I won't leave." But in Xiaoqing's ears, it became, "Erdai loves you. I haven't recovered yet, so I won't leave. We'll talk again after I recover." Xiaoqing was very unhappy. She nodded and blew out a smoke ring. She planned to go back and make a long, sturdy chain for backup. Chapter 600. In the latter half of the night, Xiaoqing sat in her room, thinking about where to lock them up. At dawn, Xiaoqing went out to make porridge, which was light and delicate. It was good for the stomach to have a bowl of porridge in the morning. After cooking the porridge, she put it on the table so that the people who woke up could drink it as long as they saw it. Then, she took some porridge out and went to see Yan Qiue. When Xiaoqing arrived, Yan Qiue and Yi were dissecting a corpse. The corpse had been dissected beyond recognition by them. There were piles of discarded body parts on the ground. Xiaoqing put the porridge on the table, then said to them, "Come and eat first. We'll continue after breakfast." Then, she cleared away the unwanted pieces of the corpses on the ground, making the strange smell in the air a little fainter. The two men looked very tired. Hearing Xiaoqing's call, they washed their hands and walked over. They each had a bowl of porridge with pickles and began to eat. Although there were still many corpses on the ground, and they had just dissected one of them, the two men were not affected at all. They enjoyed the porridge. After cleaning up, Xiaoqing sat aside and watched the meat. She asked from time to time, "How's the research going?" "We've got some clues," Yan Qiwa said in a low voice. "One of the corpses has been transformed." "It's just like what I did to myself," Yi said. Yi interrupted and said, "But the other party is even more ruthless. He seems to have a way to create high-level zombies and zombie beasts. After creating them, he transplants the upper half of the high-level zombies into the bodies of the zombie beasts. So this kind of modified thing has the strong body of a beast and the intelligence of a high-level zombie at the same time. But the success rate shouldn't be very high. Otherwise, it would be really unbelievable. We haven't found the way to create zombies, but we found that the nuclei in these corpses are smaller than those of ordinary high-level zombies, and there are impurities in them. In other words, this kind of transformation is not as good as that of ordinary high-level zombies, but the advantage is that he can create a lot of them." Yan Qiwa frowned and said, "I just don't know if there's a limit. If the limit isn't big, then it'll be troublesome." That was indeed troublesome. The other party would have a machine that could continuously produce high-level zombies. He didn't need to care about the zombies at all because he could make more if they died. He was just like the legendary necromancers. Xiaoqing calmly said, "It's impossible for there to be no restrictions. Otherwise, there would be more people coming to kill us. Moreover, if there were no restrictions, wouldn't it be heaven-defying? Everything in the world is like this. The stronger you are, the greater the restrictions. So I don't think we need to worry too much about this." The two men nodded, and then Yan Qiwa said, "According to our previous observation, zombies can really awaken their previous memories when they reach a certain level. Since they were created by that person, they should have their own memories. No matter their appearance or mind, they are no different from ordinary humans. I think we should remind all the bases that if that person is really ambitious, he may attack all the survivor bases." "Well, I'll send the message in a moment." Xiaoqing said calmly, "The most important thing is still our own strength. I want to take a look before, and the thing planted in the courtyard seems to be about to ripen. Everyone's strength has been stuck at this level for a long time. It's time to improve." The strange plant that looked like a heart was not far away from ripening. She could feel it from far away. It was emitting surging energy waves. In the past, when she had nothing to do, Xiaoqing liked to go to the vicinity, stretch out a vine, and insert it into the red soil. While absorbing energy, she chatted with others. So she often went to check it out. After such a long time, it was finally ripe. She would study how to use it and then improve everyone's strength. Strength was the best guarantee. When they finished eating, it suddenly began to rain. Xiaoqing didn't leave, but sat by the window to watch them work. Occasionally, she would raise her head to look outside. After doomsday, the color of the rainwater looked very dirty, and it was not drinkable. It was mixed with a lot of harmful substances, including corpse poison. After all, many rotting corpses polluted the water source. When the evaporated water turned into rainwater, it absorbed the dirty things in the air. Therefore, rainwater could be said to be the dirtiest thing now. Fortunately, even after doomsday, the weather like rain and snow had become less and less. After all, even the sun was rarely seen, not to mention the steaming water vapor that wanted to go to the sky. Xiaoqing leaned on the windowsill and looked outside. Although Jiang City was not big, it was empty everywhere. After all, there were too few living people in Jiang City. Most of them were zombies. Zombies weren't like humans, where a family would find a house to live in. It was orderly and harmonious. Most of the time, they would run around the streets. Sometimes, Yi would instruct the zombies to carry cleaning tools and clean the streets. When it rained, there were not many zombies. They were scattered and walked around the streets, without a trace of vitality. In the past, Xiaoqing had never thought that there would be a day where she would be away from human society and live in harmony with a group of zombies. But when the day came, she didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, she was very comfortable. If she was alone, she would probably be lonely, but her family and friends were all here. When everything is over, let's hold the wedding in Jiang City. Just invite some friends and spread the news. If they don't want to come, then forget it. Xiaoqing held her chin and then said, no one knew what the future would be like, whether the doomsday would worsen or get better step by step, but people should always have something to look forward to. There was a saying that said, if you don't have a dream, then what's the difference between you and a salted fish? When it came to marriage, Yan Qiue was much gentler. Of course, this gentleness referred to his expression and voice, not the movements of his hands. We don't need to invite too many people for the wedding. It's too noisy. Even if we invite too many people, most probably won't dare to come, he said softly. In fact, what they lacked was a ceremony. Without this ceremony, they were no different from husband and wife. Chapter 601. In the end, they still couldn't figure out how the person in the dark created those high-level zombies. The only thing they could see was that there was a very special energy fluctuation in the crystal nuclei of those zombies. No matter if it was zombies or zombie beasts, they were all products of human experiments. Xiaoqing touched his chin and said, let's catch 2 live ones next time and try to study them. The 2 men nodded, and Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue left the lab. Yan Qiue went to take a shower. After all, she had just finished an experiment, so there was still a rotten and bloody smell on her body. It smelled really bad. Not to mention Xiaoqing. Even he couldn't stand it. While Yan Qiue was taking a shower, Xiaoqing was sitting on the sofa and reading a book. The little bun ran in and said, Mama, a handsome uncle sent a letter. Then he handed a letter to Xiaoqing. Thank you, baby. Xiaoqing opened the letter and found it was from the capital, and it wasn't good news. Not long after Xiaoqing left, the situation outside began to deteriorate. The pollution of the water became more and more serious. Because the polluted water was used to irrigate the land was also polluted. Although the vegetables that had just grown were poisonous to a certain extent, at least they looked intact. But now, as long as you cut those vegetables open, you would find that their cores were rotten. Losing the vegetables and grains that were grown on the land, which was an important source of human food, immediately caused people to panic. In that case, they could only eat the grains that they had hoarded before. But how long could they last? Sooner or later, they would run out. What would happen after that? The panic spread slowly because it wasn't only one base that was like this, but all the bases were like this. The higher-ups of the bases were as anxious as ants on a hot pan. However, they didn't have a solution. Some bases began to use the water created by the paranormals to irrigate the land, hoping to restore the land to its previous state. However, the facts proved that being contaminated was being contaminated. There was no way to recover. In despair, many people chose to commit suicide. Suicide was very common in the apocalypse. Since the beginning of the apocalypse, many people had chosen to end their own lives. You can't blame them for being cowardly. When you see someone you know surrounded by zombies and eaten alive, and you can only be locked in a small room, without food, water, and the ability and courage to rush out, you can't see any hope of being saved. Would you choose to starve to death, or end your own life? Of course, there were more people who didn't even have the courage to face death. In the end, they starved to death in their rooms, or ran out of their rooms and died in the zombie crowd. However, with the gradual development of the apocalypse, there were very few cases of people committing suicide. After all, people's lives had become peaceful, and everyone had seen the hope of survival. Naturally, no one would choose to die.
But now?
Something scarier than zombies had appeared. Humans would lose their food supply. Many bases began to stop providing free food or reduce the amount of food they provided. As the food supply in their homes gradually decreased, many old people chose to commit suicide. They didn't commit suicide because they were afraid, but because they didn't want to waste food. They wanted to leave more food for their children so that they could live longer. They thought that they were old and had lived long enough. They didn't want to be a burden to their children. Chapter 602. This kind of thing happened more and more frequently. All the bases in the country became gloomy. The only one that was better off was the Qin family in the capital. The last batch of vegetables that had been shipped to the Qin family had just solved their urgent needs. In the letter, old Master Qin said that he hoped that Xiao Qing would hide the fact that the vegetables in her vegetable base were still very good. Old Master Qin had said that sometimes people had to be selfish. If they were discovered, there would definitely be people who would use the slogan of "for the sake of humanity" to force Xiao Qing to reveal the secret of why the vegetables she grew were not affected. It might even lead to a siege. After all, many people thought that those who were not of their kind must have different intentions. In their eyes, Xiao Qing was a zombie and a heretic. If Xiao Qing refused to tell them her secret, she would definitely be besieged. And they would not feel guilty at all because they would besiege zombies. Therefore, Master Qin asked her not to send any more vegetables and to hide the secret. Xiao Qing read the whole letter calmly. She was very calm. She was very clear that the secret could not be hidden. If someone was willing to investigate, he or she would find out soon. The vegetables were exported from Jiang City, so she didn't care about being discovered. Calculating the time, the vegetables should be eaten up. Xiao Qing immediately called Xiao Tong to come over. She asked Xiao Tong to escort the second batch of vegetables and her letter to the capital with several senior zombies. In the letter, she said clearly that no one could take anything away from her unless she was willing to give it away. The Qin family was also her family. They didn't need to talk to each other. She also asked Master Qin to send people to pick up vegetables and fruits regularly. After all, most of the people in Jiang City were zombies. It was inconvenient to escort things. 6 days later, Yan Hanqing and the others returned, covered in dust. They also brought back something. They brought back a plant. It was round and looked like a ball. It had a mouth. As long as its belly was poked, it would make a sound of ha. Although this thing looked stupid, cute, and strange, it was actually a good item. There was a liquid in its stomach that could instantly heal a person's wound. As long as it was not a fatal wound, it could save anyone. Previously, Xiao Qing had said that she was going to tame the 7th mutant plant, and she hoped that it would be a healing-type plant. After all, that was what she needed right now. Coincidentally, Yan Hanqing came across it, so he brought it back. Xiao Qing tamed the plant without hesitation and named it Dabai. Dabai liked to lie on people's heads. When it was needed, it would extend its white and soft tentacles that were like jelly. When it touched a person's wound, liquid would flow out from the tip of the tentacles. Xiao Qing liked it very much. She especially liked to pinch it. Therefore, when she first got it, the entire Jiang City was filled with Dabai's ha-ha laughter. Fortunately, there were not many people in Jiang City. Otherwise, someone would definitely sue Xiao Qing for disturbing the people. A few men liked her very much. She was very energetic and looked much younger. She almost became a child again. Moreover, after Dabai was born, even the little bun abandoned Yaya. Every day, he would act like a spoiled child to Xiao Qing. "Mama, I want to hug Dabai." Yaya felt wronged and hugged her only big ear. She hid in a corner and cried secretly. She looked very pitiful. Along with the vegetables, Xiao Qing's letter arrived in the capital. After old Master Qin read the letter, although he said that she was fooling around, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but curl up. His daughter. Even though she was his wife, she was more filial than his biological daughter. He hadn't raised this daughter for nothing. She knew how to dote on people. Then he was worried. He knew very well what those people were like. Once the matter was exposed, they would definitely do anything to deal with his daughter. Old Master Qin had never given in to anyone in his life. In the end, he gritted his teeth and got someone to send some vegetables and a letter to the Tan family. Old Master Tan was Xiaoqing's biological father. Didn't you see that he even sent Tan Xiao to Xiaoqing? If the Tan family dared to stand up for Xiaoqing, then he would be willing to give half of his daughter to the Tan family, even if he had to grit his teeth. When Old Master Tan received the vegetables and the letter, he was a little confused. He and Old Master Qin had never gotten along well. He had never received a gift from Old Master Qin before. When he opened the message, he understood why Old Master Qin had sent the item over. Old Master Tan had never let down heaven, earth, or anyone else in his life, but he had let down these two people. One was Xiaoqing, and the other was Xiaoqing's biological mother. After he read the letter, he was silent for a long time. In the end, he ordered someone to transport the vegetables and store them. That night, Old Master Tan sat in the study all night. He only returned to his room to rest when the sun rose. After all, this decision concerned the survival of the entire Tan family. He had let down Xiaoqing, but it was very likely that he would destroy the entire Tan family for the sake of his daughter. Was it worth it? Not only was he Xiaoqing's father, but he was also the head of the Tan family. He had to be responsible for the entire family. The next morning, when Old Master Tan walked out of the study, his voice was soft but firm. He said one word, "It's worth it." He had sacrificed his entire life for the Tan family, for the country, and for the people. It was time for him to be selfish for once. His daughter had been stolen when she was very young. She had suffered for more than 20 years and had even turned into a zombie during the apocalypse. That was his daughter. He had even held Xiaoqing when she was very young. Her soft and small body was like a ball of cotton. He was afraid that he would hurt and break the child if he squeezed even a little harder. However, his daughter had suffered for more than 20 years. How could he bear to let his daughter be bullied like that again?
So what if she was a zombie?
A zombie was also his daughter. She was also his flesh and blood. If anyone wanted to bully his daughter, they would have to step over his dead body. They would have to trample the entire Tan family into dust. Otherwise, no one would be able to bully his daughter. Old Master Tan had a hard time making this decision. However, once he made the decision, he felt relaxed. It was as if a mountain had been lifted off his shoulders. The old man's back was slightly bent. As he walked toward his bedroom, he mumbled to himself, "I will protect our daughter. Even if I have to give up something that I have guarded for 50 to 60 years, I will not hesitate to do so." "Master, do you want to eat something?" the housekeeper asked kindly. Old Master Tan sniffed. He suddenly remembered that the vegetables that Old Master Qin had sent over were grown by his daughter. He said, "Vegetable porridge. Use the vegetables that were sent over today." Chapter 603. The two old men, who were over 50 years old, had been fighting for their entire lives, but in the end, they reached a consensus on one thing. It had to be said that this was a miracle. Just as Old Master Qin had expected, after Xiaoqing sent vegetables and fruits over for the second time, there were people openly and secretly trying to sound him out. After all, everyone knew that Jingdu could no longer grow healthy fruits and vegetables. If this continued, it would be over sooner or later. No one didn't want to live, but there were more people who wanted to make an issue out of it. Their thoughts were relatively simple. That was, to be able to transport such a large amount of fruits and vegetables, it meant at least two things. First, there was a place where the soil was not polluted and could grow healthy fruits and vegetables. Second, this place was not small. If they could find the place where these fruits and vegetables were produced, they would control the lifeline of the whole country. After all, after testing, they found that all the bases in the country had been polluted. In other words, the place where Old Master Qin sent the fruits and vegetables might be the last clean land in the country. Being able to grow fruits and vegetables meant that this place could also grow food. If they controlled food, wouldn't it mean that they controlled the lifeline of the whole country? As long as they controlled this place, It meant that they would have power, status, and everything. No one could resist this temptation. So in less than a day, there were more than 10 people who came to probe old Master Qin. Most of them didn't ask directly. First, the situation wasn't at its worst yet. Second, with old Master Qin's status, they didn't dare to be too forceful. The Qin family's power was extraordinary. If they wanted to use force, they had to consider whether they were qualified to do so. Although the Qin family was very powerful, there were still a few forces in Jingdu that weren't afraid of the Qin family. They were just relatively calm and were still observing. If things really got to the worst point, they would also take action. As for face, no matter how important face was it more important than life? At the same time, these people cursed the Qin family in their hearts. They controlled such a good place, but they didn't share it with everyone. They even wanted to keep it to themselves. No wonder they were old foxes who had a high status from the peaceful era to the end of the world. The older the ginger, the spicier it was. Some of the more thin-skinned ones began to find excuses. They felt that they were thinking for the sake of the entire human race. The Qin family should selflessly announce it and not hide it. They were extremely selfish. Although the two types of people had different ideas, their goals were the same. As the situation slowly worsened, this group of people began to become anxious. They no longer cared about their reputation. They investigated openly and secretly. They all wanted to find Xiaoqing. In fact, if they were to really investigate, it would be very easy to find out. After all, it was such a large convoy. It would be easy to find out where they had passed through and where they had rested. Once the route was followed, it would be clear at a glance where the departure point was. After old Master Qin didn't make any progress, they started to check the route. Although Xiaoqing's people rarely rested in the base, they still rested after all. The group of people in the capital was ruthless. It took them a week to figure out the route map. After they found a route map, they looked at it and were stunned. This was because the most likely departure point was Jiang City. The person who drew the map was also stunned. He stammered, "Did we check wrongly? Do you want to check again?" Chapter 604. Not necessarily. Maybe someone cleaned up Jiang City and moved in. Everything is possible. Send some people to check it out. The person in charge gritted his teeth and said, they couldn't let go of any hope. They would rather kill the wrong person than let go of any hope. If it wasn't Jiang City, then it would be difficult to find it. According to the map, it must be near Jiang City. However, there weren't any survivor bases near Jiang City because there were too many zombies in Jiang City. In the beginning, there were also bases that tried to clean up Jiang City. After all, Jiang City was a very prosperous city before Doomsday. It had good conditions in all aspects. If they could clean up Jiang City and move in, it would be much more convenient. At that time, nearly 100 paranormals went there. In the end, they ran back in embarrassment because there were too many zombies in Jiang City. They suffered a great loss. In the end, they didn't dare to have any ideas about Jiang City. Jiang City became a real zombie nest. Everyone gave up on it. Now, for the sake of a small hope, they still had to send some people to check the current situation of Jiang City. Was it possible that those vegetables and fruits really came from Jiang City? If they really came from Jiang City, then the problem would be tricky. Those who had the ability to clean up the entire Jiang City must be very powerful. It would be very difficult to force the other party to give up the secret of their base. If it were them, they wouldn't be willing to reveal the secret either. After all, the secret was too valuable. If it was done properly, it could even turn Jiang City into the largest survivor base in the country. Or the most superior one. Of course, if it wasn't done properly, it would cause everyone to besiege and destroy it instantly. It was very normal. After several forces received the news, they all sent people to check the entire Jiang City. When they sent people to check, Xiaoqing was leading her friends to cultivate the land. She was also clear about the situation outside. Now, she was ready to bring the whole Qin family over. The Qin family was a big family and had a lot of people. In order to feed the Qin family, the existing cultivation base was a little small. Especially now, there were only fruits and vegetables in the cultivation base. Eating only fruits and vegetables was not enough to satisfy her hunger. She had to open a new plantation and plant a large number of crops such as wheat and rice as her staple food. When the time came, even if the entire Qin family moved over, she would be able to raise them. Tang Tianda was still in Hope Survivor Base. He hadn't returned yet. After all, Hope Survivor Base was still under construction. His presence was needed. The soil of Hope Survivor Base had also been infected. Tang Tianda had sent a message to Xiaoqing, asking if they could sell some vegetables and fruits to Hope Survivor Base every month. Xiaoqing replied to him with 2 short sentences, "Come back to work, and then sell vegetables and fruits to Hope Survivor Base at half price." Xiaoqing's team led by Tan Xiao followed by Xiaoqing, who looked like she would faint at any moment. After all, a normal person living in a place full of zombies, it would be a lie to say that they weren't afraid. They were all there as commanders. The real work was done by the zombies, and they were not low-level zombies. Low-level zombies had hard bodies, so they couldn't do a lot of work. The ones with the highest level were the ones who followed Yi for his revenge. Because they were all man-made, they were very intelligent. It was easy for them to do some work that ordinary zombies couldn't do. For example, digging the ground with a hoe. Jiang City was too big. Except for some areas that were occupied by zombies and Xiaoqing's living quarters, the rest was all empty land. The gardens and parks were all cleaned up and turned into vegetable gardens and farmland to grow some food. Those zombies worked hard without complaint and they didn't need to be paid. They were the best labor force. Because of the large number of people, it took only 1 day for them to open up a large piece of land. 3 days later, a large cultivation base and a breeding base were built. There were 3 main crops in the cultivation base: rice, wheat, and corn. After all, the seeds of these 3 crops were the most common and the most suitable to be used as staple food. In addition to these 3 crops, there were fewer crops such as potatoes. Potatoes were purely wild. After all, it had been too long since the beginning of the apocalypse. Even if there were potatoes left, they would have already rotted, not to mention germinating and growing. However, rice and other crops could still be planted here. Next to it was a vegetable cultivation base. Cabbage was the main crop in the vegetable cultivation base. As far as the eye could see, there was a field of green mixed with white. In addition to cabbage, there were some small rapeseed, spinach, eggplant, chili, beans, and cucumbers. It was more diverse. The main crop that was transported out was cabbage, and the rest were left for their own people to eat. Fruits were more diverse. Basically, all the fruits that existed before the apocalypse could be seen here. After all, after the apocalypse, fruits had also mutated and became very adaptable. No matter where they were planted, they could be planted. There was no need to distinguish between southern and northern fruits. For example, in Xiaoqing's fruit cultivation base, there might be coconut or banana trees next to the apple trees and pineapple or durian trees next to the strawberries. These fruits were generally not transported out. At most, they would send some to their own people to eat. Especially strawberries and the like, there was no way to transport them at all. They were too easy to spoil. Things like planting vegetables could also be addictive, especially after the apocalypse. When Xiaoqing and the others were planting, they simply could not stop. It was a special sense of accomplishment and motivation. Next to it was a newly built breeding base. There was a large area of grassland. The grassland was also artificially planted. After planting, it was fenced up. After finding a lot of cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, ducks, and so on, they were kept in captivity. There was a fence in the middle, separating into a circle. There were all kinds of animals in the circle. When it was time to eat, they could directly come here to catch them. After everything was done, Xiaoqing clapped her hands. Standing in the distance, she looked at the base that she had built with her own hands. She had a special sense of accomplishment and security in her heart. Even if the outside was really polluted to the point of death, it did not matter. The vegetables, fruits, grains, and meat here were enough for her and her family to eat for a lifetime. Chapter 605. Jiang City was a paradise that Xiaoqing had built single-handedly. Although she didn't know why Jiang City wasn't polluted, this was her biggest advantage. Xiaoqing couldn't bear to see the people outside in misery and suffering. However, even though she couldn't bear it, she wouldn't sacrifice the entire river town to be the savior of the world just because of her compassion. When a person was powerful and had the ability to be a saint, it was a blessing for many people to be a saint. However, if one didn't have the ability and still insisted on being a saint, then he wouldn't be a saint, but a saint bitch. Xiaoqing didn't mind being a saint once in a while, but she didn't want to be a saint bitch, because a saint bitch hurt the people closest to her. After Tang Tianda came back, Xiaoqing took him to reinforce the outer circle of the city wall. She planted a lot of lethal mutated plants. The reason why she reinforced it again and again was that she was really worried. Just like this time, if she didn't come back, if the group of high-level zombies didn't retreat, no one knew what would happen. Therefore, she couldn't help but find a variety of mutated plants and plant them all around the outer circle of Jiang City. This was only the first defensive project. In addition, she also set a bunch of other traps. She had to make sure that the defense of Jiang City was at the highest level so that she could be at ease. When Xiaoqing was building Jiang City with people, the spies in the dark also arrived. It wasn't easy for the spies to come here, but they also plucked up a lot of courage to come to Jiang City. After all, Jiang City was a famous city of zombies. They just arrived near Jiang City and then began to observe the current state of Jiang City. They were lucky. The traps and other things had been preliminarily arranged. Xiaoqing and the others weren't outside, or they would definitely notice them. There are only zombies. Someone held a telescope and looked for a long time before complaining. They could only see zombies patrolling back and forth on the city wall. There was really nothing else. There must be a mistake. How can there be a fresh vegetable farm in this state? Look at the number of zombies on the city wall. Living people can't even go in, okay? Not to mention farming inside. There must be a mistake. Someone muttered. What's the rush? Take your time to check it out. Who knows what's going on inside? The leader said coldly, it's not like you don't know what's going on right now. There's a huge reward for finding that base. Everyone is so impetuous. It would be strange if we could find it. The others immediately kept quiet out of fear. The current situation couldn't get any worse. Otherwise, the higher-ups wouldn't have sent them out to investigate as a last resort. Another person immediately complained in a low voice, where do you think the vegetable base came from? It's as if they're afraid that others will find out. Now that the situation outside is so bad, if there's really a base that knows the secret to not polluting the land, even if they don't announce it, they should use this opportunity to seize power. But I don't see anyone standing out. Who knows? Just work hard. One of them sighed and said, if we can find that vegetable farm, then everything will be fine. If we can't, then we'll be in trouble. They all frowned. If they really couldn't find it, the higher-ups wouldn't be kind to them. They all relied on this to make a living. They might lose their jobs. Hey, look. Suddenly, someone's eyes lit up, and he almost jumped out of his hiding place. The others immediately looked in the direction he pointed. Chapter 606. Originally, Jiang City didn't have a city gate. After Yin Yi moved here, he led his brothers and sisters to renovate the whole city. Especially the outer area, they built a wall with stones and built a gate, enclosing the whole city. That was how Jiang City became today. Now, the gate was suddenly opened, and a few high-level zombies walked out. The leader was a little girl, but no one could tell whether she was a paranormal or a zombie. This little girl was Gu Panpan. This time, Gu Panpan came out with a group of zombie followers, preparing to go out of the city to hunt. The car they drove out was a large truck which could carry a lot of things. Although Liangji's farm and vegetable farm had been set up very well, The animals in the farm were still scattered, and there weren't many of them. This time, they went out to catch more mutated animals to fill the farm. Before leaving, Xiaoqing said that as long as the mutated animals could be eaten, no matter what species they were, they should all be brought back to raise them. They weren't afraid of too many mutated animals. After all, they had plenty of places to raise them. If one farm wasn't enough, they could just open another one. Anyway, Jiang City was big, and everywhere was empty. It didn't matter if they opened 10 more farms. They were just afraid that they couldn't catch any mutated animals. That would be a pain in the ass. There are actually people in Jiang City. Some people were so surprised that their glasses fell to the ground. At the beginning, they couldn't tell whether Gu Panpan was a human or a zombie. But when all the zombies got on the car, Gu Panpan stood on the roof of the car and shouted, "Go!" After the apocalypse, zombies were becoming more and more like humans. However, they couldn't speak, let alone speak so fluently. Basically, they could confirm that Gu Panpan was a human. Everyone was stunned. Since the apocalypse, they had never seen a human and zombies living together peacefully. This was no longer something that could be described with the words peaceful coexistence, so everyone couldn't stop exclaiming in amazement. They all wanted to know what kind of ability Gu Panpan had to ensure that the zombies wouldn't attack her, and would even listen to her. This was too inconceivable. The few trucks rumbled away, leaving behind a group of people looking at each other. In the end, they gritted their teeth and waved their hands, all of them following behind. Only 2 people stayed behind to watch and see if anything else would happen. Gu Panpan didn't notice that someone was following them. After all, no one had the guts to follow a group of high-level zombies, not just one, but a group. Most people would take a detour when they saw them, so as not to lose their lives. However, there were a few people who did the opposite and quietly followed them from behind. After arriving at the place, Gu Panpan was the first to walk down, followed by the high-level zombies. Among the high-level zombies that came out this time, there were a few who had been modified. They were almost the same as ordinary people, with their own thoughts and emotions. Except for being unable to speak, they were almost the same as ordinary people. In addition to these high-level zombies, there were some level 4 or 5 zombies who were specially brought out to do manual labor. These level 4 or 5 zombies were led by the high-level zombies. Almost every high-level zombie was accompanied by 3 to 4 level 4 or 5 zombies. It seemed that they were not to be trifled with. After they were divided into teams, each high-level zombie took his own zombie squad and went out to hunt. There were 5 or 6 hunting teams. Gu Panpan took Xiaoyu, who was looking around curiously, to walk around here and there. Occasionally, they would pick something similar to wild vegetables. At night, they could bring it back to Xiaoqing and let Xiaoqing make a delicious dinner for them. Jiang City could be said to be a paradise for zombies. Many low-level zombies were strengthened after a series of modifications by Yi. Of course, Yi had a sense of propriety. Except for the group of modified people who had been following him before, he did not modify any new zombies. In fact, he did not like to use those zombies for research. After all, if he did that, there would be no difference between him and those people who had been modified before. However, there would be no problem if he modified the group of modified people around him. Besides, Yi did it with everyone's consent. For those modified people, they had been modified into their current appearance and could not be changed back to their original appearance. Therefore, if they could be modified again to improve their strength, they would not refuse. What Yi devoted himself to studying was not the modified people, but how to restore the modified people and end their pain. However, he did not find a solution to this problem. Instead, he succeeded in another direction. The leader of the high-level zombies was above level 5, and some of them were infinitely close to level 6. The subordinates behind them were above level 4, and some of them were at level 5. The strength of such a team was very strong. Ordinary teams of paranormals did not dare to provoke them. Therefore, Gu Panpan was very relieved. Naturally, she did not notice that there was a small tail behind them. This group of small tails was already sweating because they found that the strength of each zombie was frighteningly high. If they were discovered, they would be gnawed into bones in minutes. Now, this group of people looked at Gu Panpan as if they were looking at a demon. If she was not a demon, how could she stay in a group of zombies and not be attacked by zombies? How could she even command these zombies? The leader of the reconnaissance team said, "This batch of vegetables is very likely to come from Jiang City. Jiang City is too scary. This news must be brought back." According to the usual practice, only a small part of the entire base comes out to hunt. If it is really according to the usual practice, then the strength of Jiang City is too scary. Moreover, the people living in Jiang City seem to have a way to command zombies. This is another important news. If their method of commanding zombies is publicized, it will be a great contribution to mankind. From then on, we will no longer have to be afraid of zombies. The more he spoke, the more excited he became, as if he had already seen a beautiful tomorrow for mankind. Probably because he was too excited, he did not control his aura well. Then, he was discovered by the sharp Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu turned his head and looked in their direction with a pair of gloomy eyes. Gu Panpan also noticed that something was wrong. "Who is it? Stop hiding and come out." Chapter 607. After all, they had been investigating for many years and were very experienced. As soon as they heard Gu Panpan's words, their first reaction was to quickly hide. However, they realized that Gu Panpan was looking in their direction. The leader's face stiffened. He quickly waved his hand and signaled for his companions to retreat quietly. He did not expect Gu Panpan to be so sharp. Even though they were so far away, she still noticed them immediately. As he felt bitter in his mouth, he could only pray that one or two of them would be able to escape. As long as someone managed to escape, they would be able to return and report the news to their superiors. Then, their mission would not be in vain. However, the few of them crawled and turned around. Just as they were about to run, they saw a little demon lying behind them. This little demon was none other than Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu bared his teeth, revealing the jagged teeth in his mouth. He looked as if he was smiling at them. The few of them shuddered, and their legs trembled. The leader immediately shouted, "Run!" They were very experienced and scattered in all directions. Everyone ran in a different direction. This way, there might be a chance for someone to escape. At the very least, the chances of them escaping would be higher. 3 minutes later, Gu Panpan clapped her hands and began to count their heads. 1, 2, 3. The few people who were tied up like fried dough twists fell to the ground. They could not move at all. Their hearts were bitter. There were a total of 5 people, and all of them were lying there. None of them escaped. Gu Panpan bit her fingertips and counted twice. Then, she ordered the zombies under her to drag the 5 people on the ground and began to walk back. She threw the 5 people into the truck. There were already many living animals such as cows, sheep, rabbits, and so on in the truck. When they were thrown in, they immediately startled a group of cows and sheep. The most unlucky young man even had a pig poop on his head. When it was almost noon, Gu Panpan counted their results. They already had a lot of results. Then, she called all the zombies back and prepared to go back. The leader of the investigation team was very dedicated. He was tied up so tightly in the truck that he kept wriggling like a worm. He put his head in the gap between the wooden boards of the truck and looked out. As soon as he entered Jiang City, he was stunned. From the outside, it was impossible to see how many zombies there were in Jiang City. Only after entering did he realize that this place was indeed called the City of Zombies. There were zombies everywhere on the street. Although there were a lot of zombies, they didn't look messy at all. These zombies seemed to be in order. The higher the level of the zombie, the more orderly it was. The leader was completely shocked. If the people in Jiang City could command all the zombies in Jiang City, then no survivor base in the entire Celestial Empire could go against Jiang City. Of course, if all the survivor bases were gathered together, it would be easy to destroy Jiang City. After the shock, he saw the vegetable farm, grain farm, and farm. His eyes were shining. Apart from the fact that there were a lot of zombies, Jiang City was really suitable to be a farm. The soil here was very fertile, and the land was very big. More importantly, the land here was not polluted. Moreover, the problem of the large number of zombies was no longer a problem, because there were people in Jiang City who could control the zombies. If the boss of Jiang City could cooperate with the boss of Jiang City, then it would be a win-win situation. It would also be a blessing for the whole human race. After arriving at the farm, Gu Panpan asked her subordinates to pull the cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, ducks, rabbits, and so on out of the truck. Then, she divided them into separate rooms. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.